Good evening and welcome to the Select Board's meeting, Town of Long Meadow. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So, Stephen, we want to start with a moment of silence and maybe just announce the reason.
Sure. Today is the one-year anniversary of the tragic accident that claimed the life of Warren Coles, our longtime DPW employee. We did have a small private memorial with the department earlier today, and I just would like to ask the board to have a moment of silence in Warren's honor.
Okay, thank you. All right, I guess. And now he was, how many years with the department?
28, I think.
28 years.
Very close to 30 years.
Yeah, that's sad. And so, all right, so tonight we're going to continue our discussion of the budget and perhaps talk about some bylaws and the warrant. And so will we start with the administrative part of the budget? Is that what you're thinking?
I think if there's any, if I was going to script it, I would say maybe a motion to approve the budget, and then if there's any questions or amendments during discussion.
Well, I don't know if people think we're ready for that, to move to approve for the budget.
It would still be the discussion,
Yeah,
so I move to approve the
Okay.
budget.
Okay, and second?
Second.
Okay. So we'll
Well,
go
I guess the
discussion.
question is, at what point do we offer amendments? During the discussion part?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we could go
right.
back and amend, yeah.
So it's, okay, so we'll open discussion now, and then at the end, we'll take a vote. Okay, thank you. So, where, should we go to the administrative part of the budget? Now, in terms of administrative staff, any contracts, negotiations, those are all in order, or do we have anything pending?
We do.
Oh,
The fire department,
Oh,
the firefighters union contract expires June 30th.
okay.
And both Chief Stankiewicz and Chief Dearborn, have contracts that expire June 30th.
Mhm. Okay, okay.
There's some built into the budget for those negotiations, but those are the three things that we have coming up. And I believe the teachers, the school department unions are all in contract years as well. And I know those negotiations are ongoing.
Mm-hmm, okay.
But those expire in 2000, at the end of 2018?
June 2018, yeah.
August 8th.
Oh, August 8th, right. That's right, they have a different year.
Okay, all right, great. All right,
And just as an aside, I mean, this is fairly routine, where we build some base assumptions into the budget that you have before you. Even though we don't have settlements, we have, we track what's out there, so in the market, so to speak. And so we do build some of that into our budget, so we're not, empty-handed when contracts are negotiated.
mhm.
But you haven't built in anything for the schools to come back and say, we need more money for the...
No. But
Did they build it into their budget?
they did.
Oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
So are we going by section, or?
Well, we want to just start at the top with the, the town manager, select board, staff, I think, right? Anything in that grab you? Of course, there's a change with the ICMA conference that you'll be going to, Stephen. And when is that conference?
September or October, something like that.
That wasn't an additional conference, though, is it?
It's under my contract, I am approved to go to them, but we've never budgeted for it.
Yeah.
And so I built it into the budget for this year.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
And I'll share with you that it's a great conference. There are great sessions, but I don't look at it as I'd be going every year because it is an expense for the town.
Okay. All right.
And I haven't been in 6 years.
Where's it going to be?
I think it's in Baltimore, to be honest with you. I mean, I was waiting for the Cancun. No, it's in Baltimore. And Baltimore actually is very cheap and easy to get to, so it's a much more, in terms of travel and hotels and things like that, that's a pretty cost-effective option.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Going there this weekend.
Hmm?
Well, I'm going there this weekend.
Nice.
No, it's not.
No. It can be, if
Could
you
be.
go to the right spots, yeah.
And the telephone services went up. I mean, is that, anything
That
we weren't expecting of that, or?
I mean, that telephone covers town hall, police, fire, so it's kind of around the area of town hall. Prices have just been going up, the cost of that. We have a big maintenance agreement to cover the police and fire department, so we have immediate service should their phone service ever go down. That's probably the thing that is increasing the most. But you can see from the prior history that in FY17, it was almost $34,000 expended, and it's not coming down.
Yeah. And would it, because there's these other private phone companies that will provide services to companies, and do we ever look into that stuff? Is that?
We changed about 5 years ago to voice over internet to that type of service provider. So, I mean, that was the last time we looked at any type
Yeah.
of change.
That happened just before I got here, but I remember when it started, there was a lot of talk about efficiencies and all this other stuff, and the hard line, if you will, the copper telephone line to the police department is an expensive proposition, and we believe that part of the conversion to regional dispatch may mitigate the need to have that. We're not 100% certain on that, but that's one of the things we're looking at. But in terms of the town phone system, and Paul has spent an enormous amount of time researching and asking questions of the IT department, which kind of oversees it, and there really aren't a lot of great answers. It's just the cost is going up, and so I think the cost curve that was projected when the switch was made is not materialized.
Right.
Well, but you don't have the other side of what it would have been had you not switched to a VoIP system.
Yeah, and based on the experience with Verizon with the police department, yeah.
Right.
So, and
I do have a private contractor call me about, we did it probably about 4 or 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, a telephone audit where the people will come in, review all the lines to make sure that they're all active, they're all lined up, what they're used for, make sure we're being charged the right rate. They'll do that on a cost of recovery, so they would take a percentage of the cost of the recovery. I would plan on doing that sometime within the next 6 months, just to make sure that everything is going in the right place and there aren't extra phones out there.
We did clean up a lot of lines, I think we did
Yeah,
a
we
few years
did
ago.
clean up a lot of lines. I'm not anticipating there being lines, but sometimes they'll find that we're not being charged the right rate for such and such. It's very difficult to tell on a phone bill the rates that we're being charged and what the proper rate is.
Yeah. So good. So you'll plan to do that in the next, like in 6 months or so, and then do we get offers? Like, do people try to get the business of towns to? Is that
I really haven't been a
No.
part of that. It's the IT department that really does that.
okay? Yeah.
I mean, there's a certain continuity of service you need to maintain.
Right.
And so I don't know that switching every couple of years would be ideal.
Okay. So your approach would just be to make sure that what you're paying for is actually what you're getting, and you're not getting more than you need.
Right, and to have further discussions with IT too about any potential changes,
Yeah.
to see what they think, what might be offered and what could be a better service.
Okay. Great.
Tom, are you looking
Yeah.
for other questions? from
Sure,
others?
yes, I'm open.
Okay, I guess I still want to question the legal services and the approach to that. We've not done well on spending against budget the last few years because we tend to spend what we need to as opposed to what we budgeted. You know, so what makes us think next year is going to be different from the past couple of years where we've overspent the line item?
Hope. You know, the legal services one is one that frustrates me as well, mostly because most of the cost is being driven in response to something happening to the town, not something that we're doing to spend more money, like no new initiative or something. It's mostly defending ourselves against legal actions, or in the case of last year, the case of Converse Street, having to do a lot of unanticipated legal work for the TIP project. I think my first couple of years here, we gave a lot of money back from the legal services budget because we were reducing the role of the attorneys in collective bargaining, and we just weren't doing the same kind of legal work. The last couple of years have just been really excessive in that regard, but I mean, when you get into a certain level of process, legal process, you're committed, and you can't. The town it would be much more costly to the town to say, you know what, we're not doing any more. We're not responding to these filings, or we're not responding to these motions because we're out of legal services budgets. Because then,
And I'm not suggesting that. I think what I'm suggesting is we're under budgeting legal services because our history has been to be above the $75,000. I'll tell you, I also, because if you look at the last 3 years, it was, $109,000, $105,000, and $89,000, and yet we're budgeting 75. And so that was really my question. Should we be budgeting more? Believe it or not. The other thing is it time for us to rebid our legal services or relook at the contract? Because my understanding, and it's a few years old, was that our legal services were based on a prepaid, if you will, retainer of a certain number of hours from our town council. And I don't know if those number of hours are appropriate in 2019 anymore. Maybe we need to look at prepaying for additional hours at a little bit higher rate, because our prepaid hours are at a much lower rate than once we go over the budgeted number of hours. The supplemental hours are billed at a much higher rate. And then in addition, there's the legal fees or legal services we request from people other than our town council, which comes at, pardon me, but market rate, I suspect, or something near market rate. And so it's not just the concept of should we be bidding our legal services? Should we look for a different firm? But should we be looking at
just the retainer structure?
The retainer structure, and like I said, I hate going over a budget, and I'm not saying, Stephen, don't go over the budget. I'm saying let's budget what we seem to have done every year. This is the one time I'm saying maybe $89,000 isn't enough. I don't know.
That's a good point. I'd like to put Marie on the spot here, because you're in the legal profession. Does Mark's comments make sense in terms of making these kinds of changes, looking at?
It's hard to, because every time we go to expend, it's in a different legal firm. It's different specialties, it's different cases that are coming up. I think it's worth it for us to look and see our town council, how much are we paying over the retainer and do we need to up that retainer? Do we want to go to Copeland and Page? Are we using them for the external, and we want to put them on a small retainer? But my understanding is that we're using different types of firms. Is that correct?
Well, maybe that's what we need to see is, where did those fees go? Did they primarily go to Pillsbury, Wallace, whatever their name is?
Doherty Wallace.
Doherty Wallace.
Yeah, we haven't used KP Law, Copeland, in a couple of years. To be honest with you, we were trying to get them to help us with something, and they didn't respond. And then when Dave Martell retired, Doherty Wallace went with a team approach, where instead of just one town council, we have basically a team of attorneys at Doherty Wallace who handle different specialties.
So it's all the money's going to one law firm?
So, not entirely.
Okay.
So most of it is going to Doherty Wallace, but that's because they're representing us. They are the primary town council. Sullivan Hayes is still our labor council. We've used them on a few cases. I mean, we haven't had much bargaining, but there's been a few personnel situations that are complex and have required some hours from Sullivan, Hayes, and Quinn. And then we have also retained a firm called Metatrol, specifically for police and fire, related to IOD, injured on duty claims. But that's a fixed fee. That is $500 per month per department, so that's $12,000 per year.
So maybe it is worth it to look at Doherty Wallace's retainer and see if we should be expanding that.
There's one or two court cases that are really driving that forward.
Yeah, I mean, if the one or two court cases resolve themselves in the next couple of months, which I think we expect they will, but you can't predict who's going to sue us.
Someone else will come up.
Right, but it's really been one or two isolated things that have really driven the cost. It's not regular business, if you will. And I think to cut somewhere else in the budget, to try to cover for that unpredictability, I think you're right, Mark. I mean, is it predictable that we may spend more money than we budgeted on legal services? Possibly, but if things kind of quiet down, will we spend less? And then I think we've had success going to town meeting for additional appropriations or to the finance committee for reserve fund requests when things have gotten out of hand. Because we have to guess ahead on the budget, I'd rather not tie up levy on an unknown.
Well, I don't think, I'm not looking to change. I'm looking to Mark's second suggestion, which is let's do an analysis of our retainer agreements to see if we can have savings for the next year.
And it's been at least 3 years since we've gone out and looked at other legal services, and I'm not, and I've been the supporter of Doherty Wallace all along, but at some point our obligation is to the town. And if somebody comes in at 25% cheaper and we analyze that, we evaluate that their services will be equally acceptable, we owe it to the town to look.
We can look at that.
We have not bid legal services in years.
I mean, I think I think the retainer, the hourly retainer rate is very competitive. There are things that are not covered by the retainer.
And we've been going over the hours.
And we've been going over the allotted hours.
Right, and that's why I'm saying, I'm just going to throw a number, if their hourly retainer hours is 250 or 500, and we're consistently using 750, let's go ask them what's the retainer cost for 750, and maybe we pay a little bit more an hour for those extra hours, but we save relative to what I'll call market rates.
What are their hourly retainer rates,
65, 175?
Yeah, it's under $200 an hour.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Right, but when you go over the number of hours,
Right.
oh, yeah, right, they're
Yeah.
very good,
Yeah.
but they're contracted with, but when you go over
I
it,
hear
Bill,
you.
it gets expensive. It gets very expensive.
Probably should look at what's happened over the last 2, 3, 4 years and see if maybe that should be done, yeah. I
Right.
agree.
I mean, we get the invoices. Debbie looks at them, and the bills will say. So we may not exceed our retainer hours for the year, but still go over our budget because of non-retainer work.
We ought to take a look at that. I mean,
I
it's a line
100%
item
agree.
with that we've been going over consistently
Yep.
for the last 2 years, and
Yep.
and,
We will-
and it's a necessary expenditure of the town. I mean, I don't have that expertise, and none of it, well, Marie does, but we don't have that expertise on the board, and so we need to be able to contract it.
We can look at that, and I think if it calls for a budget amendment, I mean, we won't obviously have it for Monday.
Right.
But if we needed to amend the budget either mid-year or at town meeting, we could look at that. But I agree with you, Mark. It does need some analysis. It's fine to say, well, there's these specific reasons why we know we've run over, but that doesn't necessarily mean you shouldn't analyze the structure of the arrangements.
The last few years, it's come in under. Isn't it?
No.
No, over.
No.
No,
Each last couple of years, we've had to allocate money out of free cash to cover legal expenses. What you're seeing is expended, but not
Oh, expended from the.
Yeah, not budgeted.
not budgeted. The other thing is, sometime, usually in August or September, we need to renew a contract, and maybe we should just look now so that when that time comes, we're not scrambling to go get bids. We actually have done our homework in advance.
And, you know, we did have some additional stuff with the eminent domain, but is that pretty much a done situation, eminent domain? Is there any?
I think,
For now.
as far as the eminent
For now.
domain on Converse, I believe that's done, but we're being confronted with easements now on Dwight Road, aren't we?
Yeah, but Mike is, town council is doing the legal, I think with the eminent domain related to the tennis club.
Yeah, the tennis club, yes, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
So there have been some legal fees associated that I left out. Our attorney, we are using a specialized attorney for that one particular issue, and we have gotten a bill or two from them. That was, I guess, unbudgeted. We also had some relocation expense, so those were the relocation was a one-time expense. You know, we don't know when, there were some process things that were done throughout the takings process, but we may not spend any time or energy on that for a couple of years.
Oh, I see.
Because you know, the cases sometimes just, I don't even know if a case has been filed yet. They have 3 years to file a case, and like I said, it's not, I think it's accurate to say we may need more money in our legal services budget. We just don't know how much or when, and that's the uncertainty that is tough to, like I said, to lock up levy in that line item.
All right. So-
And we did increase it. I mean, we did increase it, I think, fairly significantly.
Fine.
Is it enough? I don't know. Time will tell.
That's my only point.
Okay,
It's a good one. I agree.
all right, well, good. And, you know, that's $14,000 in addition, right? So, that's good. All right. Don't see anything else in this,
I don't know if this, because it's not really truly administrative, but I had sent a note to Paul Sturzik, thank you, just for a comment about general salaries, and your response was very helpful, Paul. I think it ought to just be mentioned that, and I'm going to just read your response, that that it said that department heads and sub-department heads receive both cost of living increases, which we put as 2%, as well as steps if they are appropriate. And for several of them, and we were able to pick them out of here, there are steps involved. And I guess that, I was surprised that steps apply to both department heads and non-department heads and sub-department heads. But, so, in fact, the actual salary increase for a handful, I don't know if it was 3 or 4 or 5 individuals, was going up more than what I'll call the guide rate or limit of 2%, because they're getting both the 2% cost of living, which in Richard Foster's absence, I'll say, is not really a cost of living, but simply an increase across the board, as well as step increases. And I was just concerned by that. But Paul did explain it to me in his response that was the reason, and Bill, you didn't see any of this, but it's, you know, you can just go down the list and see where the salaries went up by more than 2%, and they were primarily because of that step as well as cost of living. I guess the other thing, though, that was, I didn't get, and we haven't gotten there yet, but since we're on salaries, was that the fire chief gets a salary for both fire chief and EM. Is it
The emergency management director.
Emergency management director, and I thought they were both here, but apparently there were two sets of line items, right?
Well, there's two separate line items within the fire department,
Oh, okay.
but they're both itemized, and you know, the fire chief is the first line item, and the emergency management director is the second to the last line item within the fire salaries.
Oh, okay, because they're not one below the other.
Right. Right.
Okay.
If I may, just make a comment about salaries, just for, I mean, you guys know this, but for, you know, the
Folks in the audience.
tens of people watching at home, we have a grade and step compensation plan,
Yeah.
which is standardized across the board. In fact, I think as Paul noted, I'm the only town employee not on the grade and step plan because I have a individual contract with the select board.
Right.
Police and fire chief also have individual contracts. They're the only other two that have that, but they are compensated in accordance with the step. In fact, the previous chiefs were not, and as part of our negotiations, I negotiated with them to put them on the grade and step scale because I felt like that was appropriate, like other department heads. And so there are a few things where we've done, in one case, where we make either a promotional decision or a hiring decision, where someone is a great candidate, but they need to, you know, complete either a certification, a degree, a training, something or other. We'll withhold steps until they complete that. You know, they're good for the job, but they may not have a credential that they would need otherwise.
Sure, yeah.
And so we withhold steps until they achieve the credential, and then once they achieve it, we may jump them a couple of steps that they would have gotten had they had the credential up front.
And these are generally 10-year steps, 10 years of steps, and then that's the end of it?
There are 15
steps.
15 steps.
Yeah.
Oh,
Goes
that's a
on for
lot.
your whole career, just about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if we get longevity, people like Paul and
Yeah.
Barry Jarvis and a few others who hit top step,
Right.
the only increase they get is the COLA. And there's been times where the town has not done COLAs, and so. And the other thing is, the step increases are done because, we don't have seniority rules, and there's limited longevity, and there's no, you can't get a merit-based pay, like a pay jump. And it's all kind of prescribed. So I just want, we talk about salaries, it all goes according to a formula across the board.
Yeah.
And one of the things we did a couple years ago was we gave a higher COLA to those who are at top step than we did to those who are getting a step increase that year. And we did that because over time, if the people at the top are moving 1 or 2%, and the people are moving 3% because they're getting a step in the COLA, it compresses the salary scale a little bit. And so we want to make sure that we expand that a little bit. So to equalize that in FY17, we did that, and I could see us doing it again in a future year.
And generally, most towns have a 15-year step.
Other different towns do it different ways. That's just ours. Most towns of a certain size have compensation plans with grades and steps.
How would you say it? This process was also accepted by the Board of Selectmen many years ago. It's not something that we invented and put into place. It was something that was discussed, and it's probably 12 or 13 years old. It's been going on with these 15 steps.
Right. But Stephen, I just wanted to clarify something you said, and that is that you said that if the person at the top step doesn't get, a person at the top step only gets COLAs and everybody else is getting steps plus COLAs, it compresses the salary scale. In fact, it doesn't compress the salary scale. The difference between step 14 and 15 will always remain the same percentage, because what we do is we take the whole grid and move it up 2% each year, if 2% is the COLA, and people may be moving up a step plus that, but it doesn't really compress the salary scale. It may compress the difference between you and me,
The wage,
because you've gotten,
the wages.
because you got
Right.
2 plus something and I only got 2, but it doesn't compress the scale, and I think it's important for people to understand. It doesn't,
It doesn't compress the scale.
Compress
it
the
just,
scale.
It just compresses the wages.
but that's because you have an extra year of service,
Right.
and theoretically, extra year of experience, and theoretically ought to be getting that additional more, so you're closer to my
Right, but somebody,
salary.
but somebody at top step, right, yeah,
Right.
and I hear what you're saying. You're right, I mean, it doesn't compress the scale. The
Okay.
scale is fixed. And I think that's the ultimate message is, the salary scale is fixed. Other than a few individualized circumstances that we may do depending on, like I said, hiring, promotional considerations. But other than that, it's just the same. In fact, when I get your email, I don't really look at the salary line items because they are just formulaic.
Right, but for example, if you, on hiring, I would assume that once that person is hired, the negotiation may be, and I don't even know what the numbers are, step 5 versus step 6, or step 6 versus step 7, but once they're in step 7, only a job reevaluation would then move them into another, or their normal steps would.
Yeah, there are times we have
would move them.
reclassified positions, move
Right.
them to a higher grade, depending on, sometimes the function of the job gets enhanced by the person who's in it. Sometimes the job just changes over time, and we do reclassify.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, it's the other thing. Candidly, we've been doing a lot of hiring, and it's usually step 15, and then we beg.
Well, but there, I think I'm correct in saying there's grades and then there's steps within grades.
Correct.
And so the job is graded and you have some flexibility what step, but without reclassifying the job, it is the grade it is.
Correct. I'll give
But
you, yeah.
the step is based on experience or
Right.
background or education or whatever it is.
There's some commensurate level that when you bring them in a step. But right, we reclassified the facilities director and the assistant director for water and sewer fairly recently. Because the positions really call for a level of, credential and experience that is beyond what they were to even 10 years ago because of mandates and things like that. So that's an example. And the other thing is, we knew that they were not graded appropriately because of the market, because of the applicants we were getting for specifically the facilities director position. So there is a market component to this as well, but usually it's based on roles, responsibilities, expectations, things like that.
And is there any position, or is there any situation or call for a 10-year review of this process or a 20-year review of this process of the last time we've done it? Or are we so comfortable with the system that, gives people COLAs plus cost of livings plus, or COLAs plus steps plus whatever, that we want to just stick with it? Because it, like I said, what jumped out at me was, and I'd asked this at a couple of meetings ago, and we're told, yep, everybody's getting a 2% COLA, which they are. But yet the salaries are going up as much as, some couple of people at 6-point-something%. And that kind of surprised me. And just for people at home, it's not 6% on $200,000 or even on $100,000. I mean, it's 6% on
Pretty small amount.
fairly,
Yeah.
modest salaries or reasonable salaries. So, I'm not jumping up and down because we're not talking millions of dollars here. We're talking an extra $500 or $800 or maybe most of
To
$1,000.
answer your question about the structure is solid. How individual positions are graded is something we do review semi-regularly. But the structure is sound, and like I said, it's clarifying. Everybody knows where they stand. They know there's some predictability to it. So conceptually, I think it'd be very difficult to change at this point. But I do think it works for the organization. It just may not work for certain individual positions. And like I said, we do review those.
Okay.
And it hasn't hit the 15th step itself, the policy, in a sense.
So there are employees who
13
hit the
years.
15th.
No, I mean, employees do, yeah, but I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were on a, so they, well, let's move on. What about the principal assessors? I wasn't quite sure what this meant. Is it, we have a person we're going to be hiring, is that, or no?
So when the previous principal assessor retired, we worked with the Board of Assessors and decided to do a pilot project, for lack of a better term, to have a consultant come in and fulfill that role. Now, the consultant we got, KRT, has worked for the Board of Assessors in the past, doing our measurement list and some other work. What they hadn't done was ATB cases and some of the day-to-day office hours types of things for us. Concurrently, the assistant assessor has been working on going to trainings and certifications and kind of developing her resume, and had been backfilling some of the roles, some of the duties that were the assignment of the principal assessor in the past. So one of the things we did was we did do a stipend to cover those specific duties. And when I say it was, Paul actually did an excellent analysis of what specific tasks in the office are baseline work for the assistant assessor, and then what tasks are really attributable to the position of principal assessor, and the stipend only applies to those ones attributable to the principal assessor. So far, so good on the approach. So we're keeping it for the FY19 budget. It may be in the FY20 budget. We present a scenario where we want to fund a full-time principal assessor. But right now, we think it's working pretty well, and we're going to stick with it for this year.
Is that with the staff clerical?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously, we've talked about this, the more you can use consultants, you avoid a lot of future problems.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think we've gone through this fiscal year thus far without missing a heartbeat. And probably going to save $20,000, $30,000 between the difference between the salary we were paying and the consultant fees that we're had to pay out, in return for those services.
So the consultant's fee wouldn't go into personnel, where's that located?
Well, there's two line items.
Professional tech.
Right, professional technical property assessment.
Okay, yep.
And then we're also looking to do another aspect of the job in-house. Every 9 years, we have to go out and do what's the measure and list, or we have to actually hire a consultant that they go out and physically measure.
But we always hired somebody to do it.
We always hired someone to do it. What we want to do is, in conjunction with that consultant coming in, get that done now, breaking it up into 5 years, because we have to do it for FY24, do a 5-year kind of project that 1/5 of the community will be done. So by the year 2024, when it's due, we'll be able to go to the Department of Revenue and say we already have it done. The advantage of that being is usually in that measure and list, we are finding a lot of new growth because of things that have been taken out without permits. Now we are hoping to find that a portion of it on a yearly basis for the next 5 years. So we are hoping to bring that in-house instead of a one-shot deal in 5 years, to break it out over a 5-year time frame.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, but this seems to work out pretty well, because what we pay the consultants, is a pretty good savings from having a full-time person who would then get all sorts of benefits and retirement, and
Right.
so,
And the budget has actually dropped in getting these extra services too, so.
yeah.
And the bonuses are the employee benefits, as you say. We don't have any to deal with it, that person.
But the key is, do our citizens feel that when they walk into the assessor's office, they're getting heard and there's somebody to talk to? Because if, we're not serving the...
I haven't heard anything. I don't
Okay,
know.
well, I haven't heard anything either. I mean, but one would hope that not having, and
Fake
your
news.
answer was, we now have office hours from
Right.
these
So
people.
there are
but-
limited office hours that go on through the abatement process, which is going to go on through the end of March, actually, that person is there for minimally 4 hours a week.
I can assure you that if someone had a problem with the services they were receiving, I'm sure I would hear about it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure you would.
And so we haven't heard anything. The big thing is going through one full cycle. There are certain cyclical functions that the assessor does, whether it's ATB cases, vehicle abate, motor vehicle excise tax abatements, going out and doing property inspections,
Tax rate process.
tax rate process, all that stuff. So there's certain cyclical duties, and we want to go through one full cycle with KRT to truly determine if this works. I think Paul is right. I think every sign so far is that it's working out pretty well. But we're not locked into it long-term until we have gone through a full cycle and to see how it has in fact worked out.
Yeah, and for folks at home, you should realize that when you do get an assessment of your property from the town, you should read it carefully and make sure that it's an accurate picture of your property. Because if it's off, I mean, errors can happen, but the adjustments can be made. And so I know my mom had a property, and so she looked and it said waterfront, and she was like a mile and a half away from this bay, but there was trees between her and the bay, and so she got them to reduce her taxes.
So they should look and make sure they're not waterfront property in Longmeadow.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be, yeah, well, I guess the only folks would be the ones by the river.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul, the comment you made about the assistant or assessor getting a stipend, that's pretty clear that it's a stipend, so were there things to change that could be reversed?
Right.
Okay.
Right, because she, again, is part of the clerical union. They have their
Yeah.
step and grade step
Okay.
scale also.
So it's, okay.
Yeah, so the reason why we did the stipend is because, so you could roll it back.
Yeah.
And the job description and position is collectively bargained. And so we would have
So
had.
it doesn't change her job description?
No.
It's saying, in addition to
No.
that, you're doing this other job, and here's what we're paying you for?
We have another clerical union employee who also has duties outside that clerical job description that gets a stipend as well. So there is, we basically followed that same model.
All right. Okay.
Just be careful with stipends and how they're written up. There was a case in which someone was a stipend employee in another town and was able to claim a large pension at the end of many, many years of service as a stipend employee.
This is a full-time employee that gets an additional stipend, not just,
I'm just saying, be careful with stipends and how
Okay.
they're written up if you decide to use an outside source to.
Still on?
What section are we on now?
I think we're jumping around. Are we going section by section?
I'm just going down the budget.
The election.
No one commented on it, but I doubled the moderator's budget this year.
Oh, yes, 200, yes.
It looks like it's still 100.
No, I added a $100 expense line item.
Yeah.
Part of that is the current moderator has made moderator forums
Oh, that's
a
right.
part of her process, which I think has served the community very well.
Yeah.
She does prefer to have some light refreshments, and there is a need for office supplies and things like that. She does, boards and markers and stuff.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to give her an expense line item like the Conservation Commission has, and the Planning Board has, to cover expenses. So she shouldn't have to go to, she's essentially a volunteer, she shouldn't have to go to her pocket for those types of things.
Yeah.
And we want to let her know that she doesn't have to come ask us, for permission. She has an line item that she can do and carry out the events.
I can't even, where is that? I can't.
On page 1.
Yeah,
Page one.
I'm
And
looking.
I really think that's money well spent. I
The
know
moderator.
that with the
I'm
last.
just a moderator.
Oh, okay, just one, okay.
And then in the column, it says
Okay.
stipend plus $100
$100
expense.
expenses, okay.
Yeah.
The last forum was about the zone change for the Brewer Young Mansion, and, when that decision about a zone change first presented itself, especially this board, people were pretty upset, and there was a lot of emotion behind it, and not that there shouldn't have been, but I mean, but people were, wanted to be heard, and then that forum, at the end of that forum, and during that forum, I really got the sense that people were looking at the issues involved and looking for the best decision that can be made based on what we know, but the emotion had really toned down, and that's valuable for a community, because, again, we're all, we all see each other pretty regularly. And some relationships, we've had a long time, and people may end up on different sides of an issue on that. So, those forums that's definitely money well spent, and people have made a lot of positive comments about that. So,
Yeah, she's worth every penny of that $100.
yes, I guess we say that.
So one of the things that's in here is we are building into our budget an annual process to convert human resource, like payroll type records that are permanent. We have to keep them permanently.
Correct.
We have to keep certain records, including payroll records, permanently.
Yeah.
And we had gone to CPA a few times. It kind of was not a great fit for CPA, but we nevertheless need to do that. And converting them to microfilm for storage purposes is, as you can see, expensive. And we are a number of years behind.
Well, the CPA gave us the seed money to get us to a point where now we probably have to do the last maybe 2 years. And this, if we can build in annually, we'll be able to then start keeping up. So all our microfilming or phishing is done currently. And there's not a big lag time between
Yeah.
the paper and the film.
And
Yes.
that's just the human resources. You're not talking marriage certificates and things like that.
This is just human resources that we're talking about. Kathy sometimes had her own amounts of money from the CPA fund that she was doing some of that background work basically on a separate basis.
Yeah, and of course, when an employer does not have those records, I mean, you could have records, and they'll say, well, we don't have records on that. And you're kind of high and dry, and especially when you're doing service for a town, a local government, it's really, people want to know all those dates and want to feel that those are recorded accurately. So that's good. Now, there, in the town meeting elections, that's gone up quite a bit.
So those have gone up because we have a state election in
Okay, yes.
FY19. So there are minimally 2 more elections than we normally have between the state primary and the state election in November.
Okay.
Last year we had 4 or 5. We were having elections all over the place.
Well, during the presidential year,
Yeah.
2016, we had a bunch of them between the presidential election in March, the state, so on and so
We had a
forth.
special election somewhere in town.
Could have had a special election for a senator or something. But instead of just our normal election, or like this year, this fiscal year, the only election we had was our own town election. But when we get into FY19, we have not only our town election, but we have the state primary and the state elections in the fall.
Okay, all right. So that's a regular sort of revolving.
Right,
goes up and down.
it's an up and down movement from year to year.
Okay. And,
Can you explain what you did with the reserve fund again? That you took
The reserve fund looks like it went up,
right.
quite honestly, but in reality, there are really no expenditures out of there. We started the year with the original budget of $40,000. We transferred $11,000 out of there to cover the additional
That was at
expense
the
of audit.
special fall town meeting that we did that?
No, the reserve fund, the finance committee has complete control of that. They don't have to go to town meeting.
Right.
So they actually authorized $11,000 to cover the FY17
So why does it say budget is modified, showed the 11,000 lower?
Because
It was
we
actually
transferred $11,000 out of their 40 into the line item for the audit.
So the way we handle reserve fund appropriations is show it taken out? Why don't we just show it as an expenditure of reserve funds?
When you go from one government function to another, you can transfer funds, right?
Well, it's not an expenditure for the first thing. We're just reappropriating from one line item to the next.
But it wasn't a change of our budget, was it?
It wasn't, well, you have to record it. I have to record the fact that we only have $29,000 in the account because we moved budgetary money out of the control of the finance committee to a different line item for the audit.
But, I mean, from my perspective, it skews your budget actual because it,
The bottom line of the budget would still remain the same because.
right, it doesn't change the budget
Right.
line item, but, so what you're telling me is that the reserve funds, but in past years, Paul, so take FY '17, so those are zeros because we used all the reserve funds and,
The line item is for expended. We expended 0 out of those accounts.
okay,
So any amount that they had left over would have been put into free cash.
yes, right.
But again, it's an expenditure versus a budget line. There are no expenditures, there are no
And in
direct
those years, we
expenditures.
spent zero out of the reserve funds?
There are no direct expenditures out of the reserve fund.
One of those years, we did legal fees.
We transferred budget money. These are accounting terms, Mark.
Yeah, I'm following, I hear you, I'm just trying to understand
We're
it.
transferring budget from one account to the next. We are not expending it out of the reserve fund. We would record the expenditure out of the legal fees if we transfer the money to the legal fee
So
account.
even though the reserve fund had money transferred out of it, it was no money expended out of the
Correct.
reserve fund because the reserve fund didn't write the bill,
Did we do
write the
that in the
check, they
budget?
just transferred it.
Correct. And it would, like I said, in this
Okay, I
particular
follow you.
year,
I
we had to
agree with you,
transfer
but I
money.
follow you.
We had to transfer money into the FY '17 audit line item. That's where the money would have been expended from.
Fine. So we're budgeting the same $40,000 we budgeted every year for the
Exactly,
reserve
yes.
fund.
Yes, it just looks weird because we made that transfer out this fiscal year already.
Okay.
Voodoo economics.
No, it's.
V something something,
It's not,
D something something.
it's not voodoo economics, it's voodoo accounting. I mean, they're spending it out of the reserve fund, but they're not spending it.
We're not spending it.
Not spending
We're
it.
transferring
Fine,
to another
I
line
hear you.
item.
I'm not gonna
We're
argue.
expending it from another line item.
I hear you. Okay.
So I didn't know if,
Well,
public safety, I know you talked to the police and fire chief the other night.
yeah,
Any additional questions about those?
no. I don't have any.
So probably next year, the dispatching number will change.
That's the goal. We are looking at go live July 1st, 2019, so the budget could reflect that. I mean, with any project, we may have to budget for, it may have to be the same budget for the next year, for the FY20 budget, just because we can't all of a sudden stop paying them. If we don't make that goal,
Right.
we're still dispatching. But then, once the facility gets going and we're online, the year after that, the budget will drop down significantly
But we'll have another line item.
for assessment, for district assessment, yeah. Which, I think I told you, we reran the numbers on the formula, and it's still looking very favorable.
I have a question for Paul. I know that our pension costs every year depend on our total salary. Even though technically we're still on the line for those pensions, all those people, dispatchers have left, our pension costs should drop if they just look at our total payroll amount.
Our pension cost will go down to the town. It'll be built into the assessment that we pay for the dispatchers.
They're going to be enrolled in Hampden County as well.
Right, they're going to be rolled in Hampden County, so there's really going to be a portion, or, the grant might pick up a good portion of it also, but our assessment will, I don't want to say go down, but it will be affected by those loss of salaries.
At least to start, it'll be 75%.
And-
Will be the grant.
Right, and certainly the OPEB number will also have that same effect by those number of employees that we no longer have responsibility for.
Okay.
Just Planning Board and Zoning Board of Appeals, were those based on requests from those groups? They're insignificant amounts of money, not insignificant, nothing insignificant, but they're hundreds of dollars and not
Yeah,
thousands of
the
dollars.
dues for Lower Pioneer Valley planning,
Yeah, that's just an actual expenditure
Yeah.
from the dues, the dues notice.
Okay, and the ZBA was based on their request for, I'm not even sure what.
expenditure trend for the last couple of years. it's been trending higher than the 1,500, and I think that's a lot of that is the cost of advertising has gone up quite a bit.
People need to know it's advertising whenever they have a public hearing. Gotta put
They are
something in
legally
the news.
required to advertise in the paper,
Right.
and that price has gone up, right? That's,
Right,
yeah.
it's basically
Yeah,
the
okay.
trend of the advertising.
Yeah.
I know we didn't include that this year. I know there was some discussion when we had cultural council in front of us, on whether we should be putting a small line item in there to help them out every year. Some other towns do.
They actually do have a line item, but it's in the it's in the community service budget
Okay.
at the very end on page 11. Just before the subtotal of total community service, there is a cultural council line item of $800.
How much?
Actually, we bumped them up.
$800 was the historical, and they've expended those $800 all in prior years, and Stephen bumped them up to $1,000 for
Oh,
FY
good.
2019.
I did.
Yes.
I must have gone to
It's right
one of
here.
their one-day liquor license events or something. Yeah, I think they came here and talked about the
Right.
need for additional
Yes.
funds for advertising and things like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just thought, when I saw all the other commissions and committees that we had
yeah.
passed
Yeah.
by that request, so I'm glad to see it was down there. And that's all historic commissions need is $50?
Well, you can see their expenditure history has been zero.
Oh, okay.
So one of the things they did, oh, her name escapes me, came here and talked about the letters they were going to be sending out to folks. I think we did let them use our machine.
Our machine, yeah.
Yeah, we provided them some, stationery and let them use our postage machine.
Okay.
All right.
I missed the Mario DPW when he came. The reason we have all of these drops, is because of stormwater utility?
Yes.
It is? Okay.
Right. The DPW looks like, the DPW in total looks like it's dropping significantly.
Yeah.
But when you add the new stormwater fund at the very end, their budget actually goes up by about 5%.
Oh, okay.
And I guess, Paul, that would be a good question of how, because I actually asked for, and you sent me I'll call it a unified DPW budget, but it just breaks it out by department. Is there any single department that seemed to go up more than others?
The highway budget is the one where we took out a majority of the stormwater fee funds. So you see that actually
Right.
went down by 515,000. Again, a lot of that was transferred over to the stormwater fee. The bottom line, I don't think would have increased that much, quite honestly.
Snow and ice, we did
A
bump a
couple
little
percent.
bit.
Yeah, we did bump snow and ice to 25,000. And then I think the grounds maintenance and the town buildings are in the 3% range. I take it back, town buildings is 6%. The grounds maintenance division is up 3.83%.
So the groundskeeping supplies, that was a pretty big jump, 10,000 for athletic fields, and is that?
That was more of a transfer, though, from the repairs and maintenance supply account. So their bottom line would not have been affected by that.
Okay.
So the facilities went up quite a bit because of the valves that we're building in, an annual appropriation of $50,000 to purchase valves that are on plumbing and heating systems
Right.
we're always replacing, and they're not expensive enough to meet individually the threshold for capital, but they are expensive enough where they just burn through their supplies budget.
Okay.
And we wanted to make sure we had, and we have hundreds of them throughout the town. So that's when Dan McCarthy, the former facilities director, made that recommendation to Mario, and Mario carried that forward to me, and we're supporting it because we do know that as you guys know, when valves go, it's a big deal.
Right, yeah.
And I would just go back to the grounds division, their biggest increase is in a request for a temporary seasonal employee, $16,000. There's an additional spot for a seasonal.
Okay.
Underground,
Under grounds maintenance salaries, yes.
Did I miss this, or did you guys get rid of my line item for tree planting?
No, it
No,
seems
it's still
to,
there.
Where?
I actually asked that question.
If you go to the grounds maintenance expenditures,
Grounds,
it's on page 8,
page 8.
about 1/3 of the way down. You'll see other property-related services, forestry, and other property-related services, planting.
So forestry, you have $125,000, but that's all forestry, it's not just tree planting, right?
And then right below it is $50,000 for tree planting.
Oh, I see, okay.
and when Mario was here, Mark asked the question about forestry, and do we need to be as aggressive as we had been in the past with tree trimming and removal? And the answer was not really, but he would not want to see any reduction to the planting program. He thinks the planting program is actually going well.
Okay.
So, in talking about that, I mean, the forestry, we've insourced some of it. It just is a line item that even though, Northern is out here working every single day, and Jeff McGallman is the tree warden, is having hearings about taking down trees, we still sometimes don't get all the way through that line item. And so, if you really wanted to beef up legal, like say, let's add 15 grand to legal, forestry would be one of the places I would say take it out of, and you can do it now because it's in the budget. Later on, you need a
Vote at town meeting.
vote at town meeting to make that transfer, unless it's the last month of the fiscal year.
Yeah, but with forestry, we're not even beginning to deal with the issues in our larger parks.
Nature usually, unless it's a border tree, like trees around the edges where our parks border people's properties, we just let nature take its course.
Yeah, which isn't the way you're supposed to do it. You have to go in and clean out every now and then, or else it's not good maintenance of forestry. So I would hesitate to cut
How do you-
anything until we really see, if we have the money there, should we be expanding it and doing more within Turner and Bliss Parks?
Okay.
I mean, I will attest to the fact that we have not recovered from the October 2011 storm in terms of replanting lost trees, because there's one on the tree belt in front of my house that came down that hasn't, and I know I've been told it's on the list, and so there's still a lot of replanting yet to do.
I was going to ask, so when a tree on a tree belt, either, my neighborhood, a lot of them just are like dying. They're maybe older, and but I think there's something else going on. But anyways, they get taken down, so do they put on a schedule to be replanted?
Sometimes, yes, it depends on the situation. Sometimes trees get planted in the tree belt years ago over water services or under power lines, and so sometimes they don't get replaced depending on the circumstance. But by and large, yes, they do.
And the tree warden, is he involved in making choices? Because, one of the things you want is diversity in your tree species, and they do that, or do they have a standard?
They've got a standard list they use for pretty technical reasons.
Mhm.
There's a variety on there between the tree committee and the warden. Pete Brouvier is very good, and we now have someone else who's very into forestry who's on the tree committee, who looks at variety because of the possibility of pests coming in and destroying a certain type of tree.
Well, just some trees are just messy. Maple trees clog our gutters, our storm drains. You've got trees that are shallow root system trees that destroy the sidewalks and everything else. I mean, I don't know much about it, but I know that they have a specific list, and it's for very good reasons.
Yeah, okay, great.
And I want to thank you for upping the maintenance of the fields. We've been hearing about that for years, and for you to finally put some extra money into that. This budget is great, so thank you. And you don't see any problems with custodial anymore down in Greenwood? That's all being taken care of?
Yeah, we're going to bid out the contracted custodial work. See what we get.
But Greenwood has its own employee.
But Greenwood has, yeah, we're not changing Greenwood.
Yeah.
We're still gonna maintain the employee there. Which, as we noted, it's not reflected here, but part of that cost is offset by the Parks and Rec revolving fund to have the full-time employee at Greenwood.
Where the telephone seems to be hitting everyone's budget
It
line.
is. It's across the board.
Ah, it's terrible.
Right, that's,
Isn't it all old technology? In 5 years, are we going to be rid of all of them?
Let me be the first to volunteer to give my phone up.
I never answer my phone.
We'll find you, don't worry. We'll
Yeah.
track you on GPS or something. But I think it's eventually all going to be cell phones. How many landlines? Is this all landline equipment that we're paying for here?
I can barely use my cell phone in my office.
Really?
Yeah, the reception is terrible.
Well, that's why we need a town-wide Wi-Fi, right?
all right.
And which is talking about the cell tower. Is that going to be this summer sometime?
I'm waiting to hear from the contractor.
I don't have any more questions on
DPW?
Well, we went through most of the rest of the budget, except for debt service. I can question that till the cows come home, and it's not going to change anything.
No, it won't.
And then I guess I have a question under the health insurance, under the employee. So with those, how did you figure that out? Did you figure out what plans people were taking last year, and then you built in the increases, and then you gave it a cushion? How's that done?
I took a snapshot of probably the March 1st enrollment, and I applied what the Scantic Valley rates were to that enrollment, and what the town share was. And then I also added 0.5%, only because the town's trust fund had historically subsidized 1% over the last number of years, and our trust fund is running dry. So I'm anticipating that we can still do 0.5% for FY19, but I had to build in an extra 0.5%. So when I did that, these numbers came out to be, they're kind of rounded upwards, but I don't, if you want to say that's the cushion, but there's not really that much of a cushion to really be talked about. These numbers, again, based upon current enrollment, are right there.
So you didn't actually say, well, there's 20 people in this plan, and this plan's going to be this much. You just went into a higher level of percentages of people, and,
I just took exact enrollment that we had as of March 1st,
okay.
and I used those numbers. So as long as the enrollment doesn't change, we're perfect. But as we know, the enrollment probably will change. Might be to the good, it might be to the bad, I don't know. But that's the way that I historically run this spreadsheet that I kind of do in the background.
And we don't have a fund anymore, do we? That got wiped out about 3 years ago.
There was a fund that was started that we did wipe out to do drainage work.
Yeah.
A few years ago. But the town of Long Meadow had its own claims trust fund for when we were self-insured.
Oh, okay.
And a few years back, we got, Scantic Valley called it a premium holiday, where we got money that went into that trust fund and it funded it. That was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. We've been using that money to subsidize what the rates have been by 1% over those years, so that both the employee and the employer were really paying less, or 1% less than it would have cost us had we fully funded the Scantic Valley rates.
And that's gone now.
That basically has been wiped out. We have, like I said, I'm anticipating that we'll be able to use 0.5% in FY 2019. And after that, it's probably going to be 0.
And will we have a better idea in the end of April on what that number really is going to be when people get
We
into
really
their-
won't have an idea until about October, when the teachers change over. They have the most kind of change that goes on.
And they sign up in October, not in April.
Well, I'm talking new teachers.
Oh, the new teachers.
There's a changeover with teachers retiring and any other type of changeover there. That's where the biggest change usually happens, is with new teachers coming into the system.
Oh, okay.
Whether, the person going out had this insurance and whether they take insurance or not, or if they take a more expensive or less expensive plan.
And your contributory retirement, you pretty much know what that's going to be, or we could get it?
We get an assessment, we got an assessment back in late December with the percent increase, and I applied the percent increase to the general fund water and sewer funds.
So we give the information to them back in September, and they give us our final numbers in December for the upcoming year?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. In regards to sanitation, is there a possibility, I know we've been talking about, are we finished with the negotiation on disposal fees? Is that all nailed down and
Yeah.
done?
We're in the midst of
Covanta?
contracts.
We're still in
Covanta
the midst of
replacement.
contracts.
We're in the middle, we're in the second year of our disposal contract, and we are in the third year of our hauling contract.
Third out of how many years?
5.
5.
Okay.
And it's second out of 5 as well, isn't it?
Yeah. No, 3 with 2 renewals, maybe?
It's probably 3 with 2 annual renewals at
Yeah.
our option.
Yeah.
Who is, I know it's not Covanta, who is it?
Well, it was UMM in Holyoke, but they just got bought out by Casella, which is a nationwide, or not nationwide, but big company.
And those disposal fee increases and the sanitation, but that was built into the contract? Or is that like fuel costs and things like that? How does that go up if we have the contract?
There's an annual escalation built into the contract. And then I know for the tonnage, Mario will, he has an estimated tonnage for, the actual tonnage we dispose of, but he also has an estimated price that he'll make that determination.
So Marie, the hauling contract is based on a fee that goes up each year, which I assume, Paul.
Right.
Plus, there's we took the fuel cost out of it, right? Even in this contract, the fuel cost is a separate
There's a separate clause for the
clause
fuel.
so if fuel costs go down, we save money. If it goes up, it costs us a little bit, but that's a
Right.
quarterly adjustment or something like that.
I'm not sure when, but there is a fuel adjustment.
so- So, taking care of that. Tom, can we, I don't want to cut people off. If there's other questions about the general budget, it's fine, but I think we ought to look at capital as part of our budget before we
Let's do it.
expenditures.
Oh, so we should look at capital and then
Well,
decide on the
because
budget?
it's part of I think
Okay.
it's part of the overall budget process of approving capital.
But I think you can approve the operating budget and then move into the capital articles.
Okay, that's fine.
And in fact, I think that's my preference,
Yeah.
my recommendation, let's just say.
Here's the only downside, and I'm not being argumentative. It's, if we want to put more, and last year or the year before, we found ourselves moving capital and back, and we're going back and forth because we want, and it was, whether it was police cars or it was whatever it was, if there's things you want
Yeah,
to
you're
put,
right.
change into the operating budget and the money's coming out of the capital budget, and I'm not anticipating that, but you don't have to start amending things you already approved. That's the one benefit of kind of conceptually agreeing to all of it and then just approving one budget and one amendment and then one motion, then the
I wish
other.
I'd known that before Marie made the motion. Because there's a motion on the floor to approve the budget.
That's right, well, we're
Right,
still
but-
in discussions.
Right, but we can discuss the capital expenditures and then go back and
Sure.
approve the budget.
Okay.
So are we looking at Appendix B? I want to make sure I got the right papers in front of me.
I don't know, I was looking at Appendix A, but
What's the difference between A and
I
B?
guess A is everything.
Actually, you can look at the warrant.
Yeah, you want the warrant for the capital.
The warrant's the best way to look at it?
I get itemized.
Was there something that was missing from capital that you were looking to add, Mark?
Not necessarily. I think the bigger concern is the level of capital. I mean, just in general.
The only other change to the warrant would be the request for the fire vehicle.
The number wouldn't change, it would just be split out. The 150 would be 110 for fire truck fund and 40 for the chase vehicle, or whatever he called it. He called it a chase vehicle, I don't know what its formal name is.
And that didn't go in front of capital planning because?
It did.
It did?
It wasn't in my original submission because of an oversight, but then when the chief went to the capital planning committee to present the floors, the floor project, he did, and I told him that I intended to include it. He mentioned it to the capital planning committee.
But it didn't make our two lists here.
It's in the 150 for the fire truck replacement was the intent. I'm told by Capital that was the intent of the 150, was to include that vehicle.
Oh, the chase vehicle,
Yes.
which is what kind of car again?
It's like a Ford Explorer. It's not like a Ford Explorer. It would be a Ford Explorer.
Is this the warrant for, the date on this, the 13th of March? I'm just trying to pull up the one that's got all those numbers on it.
The 13th should have it also, but the 8th is the one that I have in front of me.
And who
I
drives
have the
the?
12th.
Yeah, I mean, regardless.
Okay,
yeah, anyway.
okay, the 13th was the one I see has it. But, so we're going to take that capital list and break out the
150,000 broken down
into two.
Yes.
And who drives the chase vehicle? Is this the chief's car? Or is-
It would either be the chief or the deputy chief's car.
And the chief has one now, right? So this is basically giving one to the deputy chief.
The deputy chief has a vehicle. This would be replacing it.
He says
Okay.
it's-
Replacing the
Replacing.
deputy chiefs.
Yeah. Although the chief may take the new vehicle and then the deputy chief may get the other one.
And these are ones that go home?
Yeah. The deputy chief does not take his vehicle home.
Oh, he doesn't?
No. Only the chief does.
But are they both equipped? I remember Eric Madison telling us they were equipped with a bunch of emergency,
They are.
essentially, they're.
It's a
they're
mobile command center.
right.
Yeah.
And they're both essentially going to be
Yep.
the same. Right.
And how much is that?
40,000.
It's 110 and 40. And how much do we usually put in the fire engine fund? Because I remember we were discussing 75,000 last
Yes.
year.
I think it was 75,000 last year.
I think we upped it to 100.
Right, I think the finance committee might have upped it to 100 later on.
Yeah. Capital planning committee upped it to 100.
So,
And the board had talked about upping it to 100 a few years ago, and I think I had put in 75, again, in error, not remembering that the board had talked about putting up to 100 the previous year. So 100 was kind of the standard. And, I think the chief laid out his schedule for vehicle replacement, and one of the things is, it's not just fire engines, is, a boat, there's, a few different things that he's looking at.
Oh, so the fire engine fund would also help pay for the boat?
Well, it's a vehicle fund, we call it a fire truck fund, but I think it's a vehicle replacement fund.
so just to be clear, when it was originally set up 12, 13 years ago, it was a fire truck replacement fund. And at the time, it was based on every 7 years, we'd buy a fire truck. And that's how we came up with whatever we came up with at the time. And I guess that's, my question is, are we just throwing money in here, or do we really have a schedule now that says $110,000 is the right amount of money? And
He has a schedule.
yeah, and he gave it to us, and I probably have it.
Right, I'm gonna think that there was extra money put in by the finance committee in the fall, I think. And because we also went out and bought the last fire truck through a bond issue,
We bought it early.
we bought it early, we're probably a little bit ahead of the game at this point in time, because we still have, I think, $212,000 or $222,000 in the reserve account. This would add whatever you're gonna add for FY19 into that reserve account, and we have 2 new fire vehicles in the last 4 years.
Wow.
So here's a fire truck replacement fund plan. that, and I'm going to try to find the date on it, to tell you the truth. But it starts with fiscal year 18, so it's probably good. And it started with the engine 2 replacement, and it showed $100,000 in FY '19, 105 in FY '20, and this, I assume this came from
Chief.
the chief, because it's got a
Yep.
nice logo on front and top and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it didn't come from
Well,
me.
I was just saying, I think he just insulted the both of us.
So, but it, so it was essentially $100,000 through the current budget we're looking at now, and then $105,000 per year for 5 years, and then $110,000 per year for
Sounds.
some number of years, and with the intent of an engine 2 replacement in fiscal year 18, and then an engine 1 replacement in 2029, and a ladder replacement in 2035. I mean, so he's got it. So it was up for 105, so we've somehow put in an extra $5,000, and the question is, I mean, $5,000 is $5,000. Do we really want to do that?
And should we call it a fire vehicle fund?
Yeah, just change the name of it. It's,
We just call it fire replacement reserve.
yeah,
Yeah, fire vehicle replacement fund or something like that.
because it sounds like the boat needs a new engine, right?
A bunch of stuff.
I think it needs a little refurbishing at least.
Those aren't cheap.
No. And I think you guys know that boat goes out,
And you
Quite a
gotta have
bit.
that boat.
yeah.
So this spreadsheet that Chief Dearborn sent, not only does it have the capital investment, but it also has the balance. And it literally shows, because we bonded it, it shows it as in a deficit for the next couple of years, that fund, because he knows we owe
Right.
money back into the bond system. And I think we had agreed somewhere that we would repay the bond.
Well, we're gonna repay the bond.
No,
It-
but out of this fund.
Out of that fund.
Oh,
well,
we're not paying it out of this
It's
fund.
built into debt service right now.
Well, so why do we have so much money in the
Well,
fund?
wait a second. Then that's important, because if we're not paying it out of this fund, according to this schedule, we don't need $330,000. You know, I thought that was, maybe not, but
I didn't think we were paying for the bonded one out of that account.
so at what point, see, what he showed was a balance of, and this is fiscal year 2018, balance of $240,000 and a $670,000 expense for engine 2, leaving if you will, a deficit in the account, which was then being paid back on a annual basis. But
Why don't we just take out that truck and start with FY '19 and then zero that out, because that's all
well,
taken
but if we
care of.
do, then we've got an additional $240,000 when it comes time to buy the next truck. And we've overtaxed our residents $240,000 over a 8-year period, or 11-year period in this case.
Or should we put less in the fund this year?
Put less in the fund.
Right, I mean, that's clearly a
Yeah.
better way to do it.
And does that mean we should look at the capital projects that were not overlooked?
Or
Denied.
should we look at,
Well, there's also a little portion that's coming out of free cash out of this capital. There's $50,000 that's coming out of free cash that we would eliminate, or potentially eliminate that. And that would then end up in the operational stabilization fund if we did it that way.
No.
right, so
And
we
we're
spend less on the
super-
fire truck and then take less out of,
So make that 100,
Yeah,
and then it'll be it'll be 50, and then 40, or it'll end up being 90. So you take 50 for fire truck fund, fire vehicle fund, and then you take 40 for the chase vehicle,
or 60 and 40.
60/40.
60/40, fine.
Okay.
And now it's 100, then you take the 50 and you wipe out the free
Right,
cash
we'll
contribution,
raise and
and
appropriate it.
easy peasy.
so currently there is a chase vehicle, but it's aging out.
Ford
And he
Taurus,
just didn't
I
have it part of his, he did have it part of
He
his
asked me
vehicle,
for
but
it,
you
I
forgot.
neglected to ask capital planning, recommend to capital
But
planning.
yet they recommended $150,000. So they recommended that for all for the main fire truck?
No, they recommended that, and I wasn't at the meeting,
Okay,
unfortunately. So, but I'm told by the chief, and I think he said it the other night, that it was intended to include that chase vehicle.
He did say that. I mean, I absolutely believe him. But, okay, so he asked capital planning for 150. They gave him 150, and he showed 100 here. And, okay, so it was really the semantics of what was said to the capital planning committee. The numbers were okay. It was the semantics that were off.
But then we're now talking about taking $50,000 out of capital and putting it in stabilization.
No,
But
free
when-
cash was, because of the policy changes we were looking at,
Uh-huh.
we needed a little extra money to supplement that change out of free cash. And if you're going to reduce the fire truck fund by $50,000, you no longer need to take the free cash. You can put the free cash in operational stabilization.
Okay, but are we following currently our capital policy with the amount we've set aside? Or is the $50,000 taking out the new policy that you're looking to put in?
We were adding the free cash to fully fund the recommended capital plan.
Which is
But
following
the
the capital.
general fund contribution was less, with the policy changes, it's less than we would have, the calculation not including excludable debt. And he's got the thing, if you want to, that he handed out, right?
Okay, so what recommended here is the new capital policy, which,
Plus $50,000 from free cash. So it's the new capital policy plus $50,000.
As
Oh, plus
opposed to the
50.
old capital policy, which would not have required that $50,000.
Correct.
the
from free
old
cash.
policy,
Right.
so in other words, I was looking at this here, the old capital policy would have had an extra 118,000 in it?
No.
Marie, the way it goes is, you could have either the old capital policy or the new capital policy plus $50,000 in free cash.
Okay, well, what I want to
So
know
if
is,
we take out the
What are the dollar
$50,000, we
amounts?
just go back to our existing capital policy, and that works.
but is
But then you
this,
have to levy for that amount.
If we had the capital policy as it stood,
Yes.
or the current,
right,
we wouldn't have to use the $50,000 in available funds, free cash, plus we would still probably have an additional $60,000 to put in to capital, but we would have a totally unbalanced budget.
Right.
Right, so
Okay.
I need to walk you through how this all happened,
okay.
okay? Because I think you're forgetting the 2.3% goal.
No, I know that, so I just want to understand the raw numbers, that you came down
Right.
40 plus 50, 90,000, and then to make up for it, you pulled 50,000 out of free cash, so you're only down 40,000.
We didn't start that way. So basically what happened is, just so how we ended up in this situation, which is a little unusual, prepared the capital plan in accordance with the existing policy. We were having discussions about amending the policies just on principle, okay? Just because it made more sense to, we kind of realized that the intent of the policies were, by including excludable debt in that calculation, you were really beyond what the stated intent of the policy was, which was a percentage of the operating budget. And then decided, let's go for a 2.3% increase instead of a 2.5% increase. So then we were already short of what we thought we had to work with. And then the Scannick Valley numbers came in higher, and to accomplish all of those goals, we had to bring in $50,000 of free cash. And it turned out that we needed to reduce the policy. Let me take that back. We needed to recommend the policy changes to balance the budget by lowering the OPEB and capital contributions to $150,000, whatever it was, to stay on that 2.3%. But to fund the capital plan that was recommended, which was based on 2.5% and in the current policy, we needed to plug in 50,000 of free cash.
And you'd still be short 40.
Well, no, we would just add a project if we had that money to play with.
Okay, so the question is, if we're really pulling, there's two ways we could do, is you could either just put it back to free cash and don't use free cash, or you could fund another project.
Or put the free
50,000.
cash in, you can use the free cash for something else. You can put it in operational stabilization, you can do,
Or you can fund another capital project.
or you can,
Or leave it
or
in
you
the
can
fire
levy,
engine.
oh, no, it's, you can't levy less, yeah, I mean, you can just
Right.
do whatever. You can take 50,000, you can take the pavement replacement number and make that number, sidewalk reconstruction is pavement preservation is 600.
Mm-hmm.
Make that 550, and then take the 50,000 in free cash, and then levy $50,000. I mean, you can do pretty much whatever you want.
No, but what I'm saying is, we were talking about decreasing the fire engine line by maybe 50,000. And you
Right.
said you could just put it back to free cash where we took it from.
Right.
And then that will go into the stabilization fund.
Yes.
Or we can just move that down to another line item if we're gonna take it out of fire engine.
Except that that would be equivalent to using one-time money for an operating expense, and we have a policy not to do that.
No, I'm saying take the 50,000 out of the fire engine fund and either put it in sidewalk or go down and do the
Yeah,
pool or
right.
the camera project. We could do any of those things, right?
Right.
You could move it in that fashion
Right,
also.
yes.
Yeah. So those are our options.
Yeah.
Leave it the way it is, take it back to the stabilization fund, or pick up another project.
Okay. Do we want to read some consensus on that first? Because my position is, we shouldn't be taking money out of free cash for expenses, that even though capital. I think free cash is free cash, and free cash is for unanticipated, not budgeted expenses. So my personal opinion is, it's nice that we don't have to take money out of free cash, just don't take it out of free
Is this
cash.
because you went ahead and did the calculation on the policy that you showed us the other day where debt
Exactly.
exclusion?
These.
Although that policy hasn't been-
The whole plan here utilizes the policy changes as we propose.
So to go through that again, we started building the budget and the capital plan based on the projections that we've always used. When we talked about changing the policies, it wasn't about balancing the budget.
Right.
We were developing those policy recommendations really with an eye towards FY20, okay? When the final numbers started falling into place,
Yeah.
Scannick Valley School Department budget, and they passed a very reasonable budget, but, they were on point, but when we were crunching it all together, we realized that the policies, which we were gonna support anyway, if we did them now, the budget would be balanced at the 2.3% increase. And since we felt like they were the right thing to do just on their own, we brought them forward somewhat out of sequence. Had I known then what I know now, we would have done the policies in October, and then everything would have been built according to these policy recommendations. It's just something that kind of emerged in our thinking. So the reason why this is a little weird is because of the sequencing of this. It won't be this way next year. Or if you don't adopt the policies and you just vary from them, then maybe it happens next year. It's up to you guys. But that's why this is a little bit unusual, is because of the sequencing of all this. And again, if you want to go to 2.5, like we started off in October, then there's no issue. But if you want to do only 2.3%, and I agree with Mark, either put it back into free cash or up the legal budget $10,000 and put $40,000 back in free cash, something like that.
But why not put it into a capital project? Because basically, you brought capital planning down $90,000 from what we were expecting it to be and you say it's not to balance the budget, it's because you feel it's good policy.
But this year we did it to balance the budget, yes.
Oh, you did? Okay. So if we're looking at $90,000 and now we say there's $50,000 that's really being overplaced in the fire vehicle line, why aren't we looking at our other capital projects that are down here?
You could buy a new engine for the boat.
I think he's looking at a couple of different options for that, and that was not he did not submit that as a project. I truthfully think most of the things that were funded were the priorities. I'm not aware, I'd have to go back to my capital planning files, and maybe we can do that for Monday
Well,
night.
there's the
But
pool refinishing.
that got approved, didn't it?
No, that was denied.
Oh. I thought that was approved.
I have it down underneath here. My understanding is anything that's down here did not get approved underneath the appropriated line of Appendix B.
No, pool refinishing is on the warrant as approved.
Okay, so what is not approved? The culvert wasn't.
But we're gonna bond that.
Glen-
The culvert is bonded.
The Morningside is bonded, yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out what was not approved on the,
The AEDs weren't approved, and truthfully, we really were rethinking that approach anyway.
right?
The cameras weren't approved. I think we'd like some seed money to get that started, but the question the capital planning committee asked about what's the total of this project going to be is a reasonable question. So we need to build that out before we,
Okay.
you know, we should answer that before we ask for money. Nothing that I can recall. I don't think there's anything in the capital that didn't get funded that I heard from a department head said, oh my
Okay.
God, is there any way to save this?
See, I understood by looking at this, the way it was broken down the line, the pool was not approved. So you're saying the pool was?
It's on the warrant right now.
Because it was their number one request.
It was the school's
Okay.
number one, yeah.
The ground sidewalk part, I'm not emotional about in any way. In Glenbrook School Field, well and irrigation, phase one of a $200,000 project. So the only thing I was looking at was, and I was pushing, was wondering whether we should be doing the pool. But if you say the pool's already on there.
Right, you mentioned it the other night, that we had volunteers paint the pool, and then there were some problems with it, how it was affecting the filter.
Yeah,
Pool is on here.
the pool is on there.
Okay.
So, it's clearly-
Can I just ask a quick clarifying question? Paul, I don't know, I think I'm looking at the right thing. This is your overall budget overview. It doesn't, or does it show using free cash, $50,000 of free cash as input? Because it has down below.
You're right, it does not, because I did not have the capital number at the time.
Oh, okay, because the capital number.
The capital number came in higher, so in order, I used what I had set aside there, plus I needed $50,000 more to make it work.
Gotcha, okay.
So one of the reasons, Marie, why CPC's list is confusing and the pool is able to be funded is because they did not take out the allocations from water, sewer, and stormwater to the DPW vehicles. They were carrying the full cost of those as general fund appropriations,
okay.
and when we applied our percentages, we were still able to meet the policy number and do a couple extra things. So that's why that is different than what they gave you.
Okay.
So we were able to meet all of the requests, even though we went 90,000 below.
Not all of the requests, but all the ones that we felt were, not say important, they're all important, but the ones that were most ready to be funded.
And where were we on sidewalk reconstruction as we were last year?
I think it's the same. I think it should maybe be higher.
Yeah, we're way up.
And what about the guardrail replacement?
About the same.
I think that one's down, actually 25,000. I think it was 50 last year.
Yeah.
And what about pavement preservation?
That's probably up.
Yeah.
Well, then,
There aren't as many.
I don't have last year.
We're getting ready to go out to bid on Richard's Long Meadow Street guardrail. So that's happening. That's going to be happening this spring.
well, maybe.
But there aren't a lot of other we've been doing a lot of guardrail work, and so we felt we could dial that number back a bit and add it to other places.
Maria, I really think we ought to talk about really consider whether we want this $50,000 coming out of free cash for capital. I think that, if we agree to do that, then we can discuss where we want it to go. But if fundamentally, and I'm one who thinks that fundamentally, we shouldn't be using free cash for next year's operating expenses, even in addition to our capital budget, then, we've got the solution in the fire truck line, and we don't start looking to spend money that we may not be really willing to move. I think my personal opinion is, all respect to Paul Pasturzik, is using bringing in $50,000 of free cash to balance a capital budget was I'm not sure the right word, was kind of a last-ditch effort of making things work. But if we don't have to do it, we ought not be doing that at all, and we don't have to do it now.
Well, we are committing to 90,000 less in our capital, and how much less in our OPEB?
No, we're committing to 90,000 less than what?
Our policy.
But we're funding
current-
everything we need to fund.
Well, that's because that's everything that was, I'm sure. it's
Everything that
not
was
all our
requested as a
capital
priority.
needs.
No, but.
We cut 25,000 from guardrail replacement. I mean, But, no, I'm just stating, we went down 90,000 in the capital, and we went down how much in OPEB?
I think it's like 40,000, almost 40,000. Yeah, the other thing with capital too, Morningside, well, it's not in this capital outlay. It is the next in line at 500 and some odd $1,000 to be bonded. Do you include that as a capital outlay or don't you? So we're gonna have debt service on it. It's gonna be eventually paid out of debt service and not necessarily out of capital, but it is a capital outlay.
I guess, I agree, I've always agreed with Richard on the need to invest in infrastructure. But I also agree with Mark that there are times you may need to balance out priorities. And this year, the priority was not going to the levy limit. And if you look at the almost 600,000 that we're proposing to bond for Morningside, and you look at the $2.5 million we're going to be spending on Dwight Road and the $15 million we're going to spend on DPW, we're making significant infrastructure investments in our community in this time period we're in. Now, we still are falling short on asphalt, sidewalks, things. We could still do we could probably do twice as much as we do each year, but we have to balance it out with other priorities. And so I feel like it feels right the way we have it. And in this particular instance, to maintain that priority on the levy limit, returning the $50,000 of free cash, I think is or using it for another one-time cost or something like that.
My question is this, the guardrails, you're saying all the guardrails that we're gonna try to do this year, we could do on half the cost of what we did last year, even though we were behind on the guardrails.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and find their application for that, but they basically were scaling back the guardrails based on, the needs.
Oh, so you'd be putting up less guardrails?
Correct.
Okay, then the other question is, how much is that levy limit that we're not going to? How much are we leaving on the table?
$93,000.
How much?
$93,000.
$93,000. So that's where we see it coming through the capital and a little bit of the OPEB. It's almost equal. So if we leave it in free cash rolls over till next fall.
It would.
And then if we have our policy of OPEB being paid for in the fall, I just don't want it to become, then departments go grabbing the free cash for new projects in the fall that we've had
They
in
would
the
have to
past.
come through you
Yeah,
first.
it comes through us first and then through town meeting, Marie. I mean, it's not like it's sitting in the pile, who can get to it first? It's,
And then I want to go back to one last question on this chase vehicle. The current one's how old? And how many
I
miles?
think it's a hand-me-down cruiser.
Yeah,
So
it's a hand-me-down
it's
police vehicle.
6, 7, 8 years old at least. It was handed down probably with 100,000 miles.
No, they may have
No?
bought that one.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm still working on guardrails.
No, okay.
and Marie, by the way, the Glenbrook School field and well irrigation, that's also on the warrant.
It is, okay, so
They all got- they all-
my appendix B's
Well,
totally
it's
confusing.
I guess Stephen explained it, is
Yeah.
that we were able to move those up because some of them were being paid for out of the dump truck, the pickup truck with plow, and the other half-ton pickup truck and the rack body, whatever, are all being partially paid for out of the water stabilization fund and the sewer stabilization fund. And I would argue that in the future, some of them ought to be including the stormwater stabilization fund at some percentage. And I don't want to do it now because we're down the road a long way, but if in fact...
I would
if in-
disagree with that only because we're subsidizing so much of that right now. When they become fully funded, I would agree with you.
That's fine, but in theory, it's a separate
Yes, absolutely.
section of the highway department or the DPW, and, we're going to be using some of this equipment to work on storm sewer systems.
Yep.
So, and right now it's 50, 25, 25, right? But
Yes.
it 50% being funds from the Treasury and 25 from water and sewer, it might be 50, 20, 20, 10. Or it might be 50, 22 and a half, 22 and a half, 5, or whatever it is. But at some point, we ought to do that. But for now, I just, think we ought to consider making some changes here. And again, it's the capital budget separate from and it doesn't impact the operating budget expenses at all, what we've talked about, unless we want to add money to the legal line. And that's kind of you add it, and if you don't need it at the end of the year, it rolls through to free cash.
I would prefer to roll it towards guardrail replacement. I mean, I'm just uncomfortable with cutting the guardrail replacement in half when Richard's been saying that the guardrails in town have not been replaced or taken care of.
But that's
for
not true,
years.
because for the last 3 years, we've been doing guardrails far more than we ever have. And if the DPW came back and said, here's what we need next year for guardrails, and more importantly, here's the projects scopes we can manage next year for guardrails, then I think it's appropriate. It's not for me to say, no, take more, do more, because we're going to find it's not going to be able to be done potentially.
Well, we don't know if that's true, or if they
Oh.
just cut it as that was a easier place to cut.
Well,
No, it's an inventory that was attached to their application that details the conditions and the ones that need replacement
and
are.
Well,
the same with streets. I mean, I'd put more money into pothole repairs, but, Mario came in here and gave us here's the sidewalks we're going to be doing in each of the next 3 or 4 years. He gave us the map and the streets, and I don't think we need to accelerate any of that stuff necessarily. Certainly because of the cost of that stuff, we're not going to do much acceleration and streets with $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000. But
how about sidewalk reconstructions? Definitely has not changed from last year. It didn't get cut.
I don't know what the amount was last year. I have to go look at the warrant.
Yeah, I don't believe so. If anything, those two might have gone up a little bit.
The guardrail is really based on, if you looked at the inventory, I mean, I'm not going to bother putting it up on the screen, but we did a bunch of FY17 guardrail work, and then when you look at the inventory, much of it is in great shape. So there's still work that needs to be done, but we've done a lot of work in the last few years, and I think because we've gained ground on guardrail, it's not as needed.
Okay. Then,
I mean, if you gave them the money, they would spend it on. They'd find guardrail to spend it on, but I think they were trying to keep the focus on asphalt, quite honestly.
Maria, I'll tell you what last year's was. I'm just looking it up.
okay.
I'll raise
What
you.
was sidewalk last year?
That's what I'm looking up.
But the Long Meadow Street guardrail, that wooden one there, I mean, they just had that big excavation project, right? Because there was the bank was sliding off, right? And so you'd want to be sure that all that was in order before you changed or repaired all those guardrails.
What's that?
Right?
Street.
I mean,
Yeah, that's a part of it.
you know,
So Marie, last year's town meeting warrant, sidewalk reconstruction was $400,000, and this year it's $425,000, so it
Okay.
actually went up,
I think, in fact, that's the 50.
okay?
In fact, I think that 25,000 is the 25 they took out of guardrails. Now you say that.
And again, what was the pavement? I think the pavement went up also.
Last year's pavement preservation was $500,000, and this year it's $600,000.
Okay.
So there's substantial increases in both.
Then my last question is, this chase
Thank you.
vehicle has how many miles on it?
Hold, please.
but when the chief was here, I got the impression, I don't know if other people did, that he could make it another year with this thing, with this chase vehicle.
With the
Well,
chase vehicle?
Here's the point,
That
though.
was
We're
my
not
impression,
buying the
because
chase
it's-
vehicle.
because
We're putting money aside
Yeah.
to potentially buy it, because both of these things are going, it's capital into the ambulance fund. It's not for the purchase of, and then the purchase of it would be separate. And so if the chief finds he doesn't need it, the worst thing we did is accelerated our ambulance fund a little bit, but we actually cut him back by
The fire fund.
50, the fire fund.
Yeah.
Right, well, I had thought we were breaking that out into two separate amounts of 60 and 40.
Yeah.
So he
Okay.
specifically would
I think
have
we
the
should.
appropriation.
For
Not that he has to use it July 1st.
Right.
But he specifically would have the
The
authorization.
authorization,
Right.
you're right, Paul.
So it's a 2006 Ford Taurus.
Brand new.
Yeah.
And it's been in service for 11 years. It was transferred to in 2009 to the fire department, where it had 52,000, or maybe it has 52,500 miles on it now. they're starting to dump money in it, and it really doesn't, as it says, this vehicle really was never well suited for our needs. It doesn't really carry a lot, and it has 103,000 miles on it now, and it's falling apart.
All right, I guess.
So it's not, and so the vehicle, the two vehicles, the chief's vehicle is a take-home vehicle. It's a mobile command center. I think that the vehicle we're getting will be that as well. But the secondary vehicle that we're replacing is also used for inspections, fire safety. I mean, there's a lot of out in the town stuff that the deputy chief does that this vehicle provides for.
Okay. All right, then, I guess the $50,000 stay for free cash is my recommendation, so we can do something towards the stabilization
Yeah,
fund.
Bill, Tom, you okay with that?
I guess I would.
Essentially, reducing the allocation for the fire truck because we don't need it, and
Well,
using,
it's the same fund. I think it'll be necessary whether you take it from free cash or keep it in there. I mean,
Well,
It's an accounting.
the way that it's written now, 150 would go into the fire replacement reserve. What I'm hearing the change would be is 60 will only go into the fire replacement fund, and 40 will go towards the chase vehicle. So it's freeing up $50,000, which is then going to be applied and not utilize free cash. And that, in essence, will increase a different warrant article by 50,000, Article number 3, where money's going in from free cash to the town's operational stabilization fund,
What is that number right now?
170,000.
Okay. And does that bring us percentage-wise to, where are we then on our,
We're about 6.5%, I believe.
so that gets us better than we were last year, because we were like 5.5,
It's actually,
right?
it's right about the same, Marie. Yes, I take it back. We're right about the same right now. That would bump it up a little bit higher.
Okay, because Moody's was complaining that we were really on the edge of not even being in their range.
We were found to be on the short side of like-rated communities.
5 to 10 is what they want to see.
And 5 to
I
10 is
think
what
they-
our policy states.
They
Right.
want a 6 to 10, right?
I think obviously they would, if we're short in the 5 to 6 range, they would probably want us in the 8 to 10 range.
Yeah.
Which, quite honestly, isn't realistic.
Yeah, but
These
being
every little bit
under
helps here.
6 is not good.
fine, so this, every little bit
Yeah.
helps. I
So
mean,
that's why I think I will go, my recommendation would be to put it in the stabilization fund, because I've been nervous about being under 6.
So that moves Article 3 from 170 to 220, Paul?
170, 220, correct.
Okay.
In FY, at the beginning of the fiscal year, our general reserves were 6.49%. As of July 1st, 2017, as of July 1st, 2018, I'm expecting it to drop, but, and that would be with the absence of this 100 or 220. So it would have dropped to 6.27. So it's going to go up to somewhere about 6.75, maybe
Oh, good.
maybe 7% at best, but it will go up.
Yeah. I guess that's worth it. That's my feeling, because that's something that's been making me very nervous in the back end, and that is
Especially when
what's
we're
And
going
having
on.
said that,
bond
Marie, we don't know what's coming up in the fall, when the free cash really becomes free cash, we end
Well,
up doing something else. But right now, this free cash is going to go into the
Right,
operating
and
stabilization.
as Paul just noted, we're about to issue a sizable amount of debt, and having better reserves will help. Do we have 100,000 for free cash for OPEB in any of these articles?
We do not. We only have the 400
The
and,
1%.
But we were going to do that in the fall, Steve.
Right, we're gonna do it, Paul.
Right.
Yeah.
Or is it- or
The
we were
certified, the
looking-
new certified free cash, right.
We were
And
going
we're
to consider it
looking-
in the fall.
Right.
Yeah, and I was hoping we consider the turn back on health insurance for the fall,
Right,
as
yeah,
starting to
fine.
earmark that.
And that's the right time to do it, because I think you know what, we closed this fiscal year out, and we know what we've really got. So, You were just thinking about the policy change, Stephen. I think we can handle that in the fall.
Yeah, I agree. And in fact, we did say that, I forgot.
Mark, do we need a motion?
Well, I just want to finish going through the capital, then let's go and vote on the motion on the budget if we don't want to make any adjustments to the budget, and then we'll make a motion and vote on the capital.
Well, so.
Is that okay? So
Could
we don't have two motions on the
We don't have to do
floor
the
at a time.
capital first?
Well, no, we don't need
It's
two
not
motions.
affecting the budget in any way?
Not right
Not
now.
at this
But
point.
I just want, like the discussion we just had, do we want to move some money somewhere else? I just want to talk through capital, if people don't mind, and then we can go back and have one motion on the floor at a time, so we know what we're doing.
Okay.
I mean, I'm trying to track what we're going to do with capital, and right now, the only thing I hear is that one change to the fire truck and splitting it out, right?
Right, but then a reduction or a change with a funding source, that's all, the $50,000 funding
Right.
source.
And you know, I guess the bigger question for me, is always, you know, pavement preservation and sidewalks, they're a, pardon the expression, bottomless pit that we can pour money into.
Oh, I'm throwing my body on top of those. Richard's just.
Well, but the
not going
point is,
below.
you know, we're literally up 25%
Yeah.
in expenditures of those, and
Well, we can, let's do it. I mean, the sidewalk where Edie fell and broke her arm, still not repaired. There's plenty out there. It needs to be done.
the only caveat is, next year it may have to come back down 25%.
Or maybe we'll be lucky. And let's get
That's
what we
fine.
done.
I mean, literally, if we're up from 400 to 425, that's not quite, no, that's a lot more. 500 to 600 is,
I have a question on the
20%.
boiler replacement. Are we going to try to go for those grants that are out there? Because I know we got to
can, but
wait
the-
for facilities guy to come on board. but-
Right. A lot of times, there was issues with the grants, and I think it was an eligibility question.
Oh, well, let's go for them. No, I think let's go for them. Because remember, the Mass Saves was saying, give us all your boiler information and we'll plug in what we can.
And we
for
did, and
you."
I don't think anything came of it.
No, we did not get it to them because we were still missing the guy who had the information. He was still working on the numbers as of 3 weeks ago. So if we could just put that as a priority to try to follow through on that. Because we spent a fortune on boilers the past 2 years. And are there any more out there? Yeah, there's still other buildings ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
Were you ever able to do a group buying, what was it? Discounts, because we're buying 3 or 4 at a
Well, no,
time.
we bid them, you have to bid it, you don't go out and buy them, you bid them, and we bid them all together.
Yeah, okay.
And I don't know if we achieved any cost savings, I have to imagine we did, a little bit. But then we also had 2 schools that didn't have boilers that were running, and we had to bring in temporary
Right, the
heaters.
burners didn't show up.
And the police department limped through the winter with their existing boiler, we didn't even put in theirs, yet that's gonna be when the weather clears.
Paul, can I just ask you a question? If you look at the way Article 8 is written now, it says, from raise and appropriate, $1,665,000. It says from capital stabilization, guardrails, $25,000. It doesn't say anything about $50,000 from capital stabilization. It says 25. Where's the other 25?
I don't know where the 50 from capital is. 50 is going into the operational stabilization fund, not the capital.
Oh, right, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's his capital stabilization, you're right, okay. This is just kind of the residual, what was in capital
This is
stabilization.
the residual that was in the capital
So,
that we're cleaning out.
okay, so that's not gonna change that part of it,
Right.
okay. Gotcha, I'm sorry, I apologize. Okay. I'm all set with capital.
So, it's-
I mean,
do we do the vote on the?
The budget.
Budget, and then we have to do a separate vote on capital?
Well, you have to go article by article.
Oh, through the warrant, okay.
And warrant. Okay. So then, we're ready for a vote on accepting the budget. Our discussion, we'll close discussion. All those in favor of accepting the budget as proposed? Okay. Unanimous, so that's it. And now, do we need to open the warrant to discuss it? Or is that, is it still an opened?
well,
Or is
I
it-
don't know that we need to go, no.
was never
the
closed.
Warrant was never closed. I don't know.
Okay.
You want to go warrant article by article?
I mean, if you, I suppose, you could make a motion that we approve Articles 1 through 8, or whatever you want to do, Mark, and that's,
Yeah, which is probably what
So-
we
Well,
the
before you do
standard-
that, we were talking about changing wording on Article 4. Did you,
Right, Article 4, we were going to drop the fire replacement reserve from 150 down to 60. We were going to add a line for fire board
Whoa,
explorer.
You and I are, no, we're talking Article 4, not the
Four.
capital.
I'm sorry.
oh, Article 3, I guess you were talking about.
Article 3 would change from 170 to 220. If
No.
Article, if the capital article goes through as you guys were talking
It
about.
already says 220.
It says
No,
220.
no, it doesn't. Not
Mine
mine.
Mine does.
Again, there's different versions. Originally started off at 220
Okay.
because we had to utilize some for the capital. I didn't have the capital numbers.
you've got an old version there.
Oh, okay.
Let me give you this one. This is clean.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm actually
I'm looking
gonna
at the
step
same
out the
one.
way.
This is,
Drastic while I'm gone.
You have the same one?
yeah, I think.
Or we'll share?
No, here.
No, the old one.
I can open mine on my computer.
Fine.
No, I mean,
All right.
Tom and I will share.
Tom, do you want us to go through the warrant article by article?
Well, if we can, well, let's look at Article 3, so it's 170, we're gonna make a change to that one,
220?
to
Well-
220. Maybe we could
Well, but you
just-
can't make an change to that unless Article 8, the vote changes on Article 8. I mean, if we're committed, we're going to change Article 8 by down $50,000, then yeah, let's do that. But,
Okay.
I mean, do you want to, but
So
the
we
question
could-
is, do you
some
want
of
to,
these
do we
things
just
are-
want to go start at Article 1 and 2 and just
Yeah.
make a motion to
Because
approve?
Article 1 is a pretty standard appointment to the Goldwaite request. Choose 3 trustees, so, yeah. Are we trying?
I'll move we approve Article 1 for the
1
warrant.
and 2.
Okay,
Well, no, well, let's do,
Oh, go ahead.
let's just do them one at a time.
Second.
okay, all those in favor? Okay. Now, number 2.
Move to
Okay.
approve Article 2.
I'll
Okay.
second it.
Second, okay, open for discussion. Is there any discussion on that?
Yeah, I guess the question is 300,000 the right number after this week's?
Well-
And are we going to adjust that? That's why I didn't want to do them together, Marie.
Maybe that you hold that one until Monday night and I can get an update. I mean, 300,000, I don't know if it's going to snow again.
And it could snow the week after, it should
supposed to.
snow next Thursday too,
And
so,
unfortunately, I don't know what yesterday's
right.
snowstorm cost either, so
right, so,
So why don't we just table the motion on Article 2?
simply we can bring that one back on
Number
Monday.
3, we can't discuss until we discuss number 8. If we look at number 4, Article 4, transfer available funds.
I'd like to change the wording on that. Streetlight feasibility study, is that what we agreed to before, the
That's
change?
right.
Oh, so
Streetlight feasibility study,
feasibility,
okay.
not cost.
I move to approve Article 4.
With that amendment, with that
Second.
change in words,
Yeah.
okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Mark, okay,
yeah.
okay. Article 5,
You track all these.
I'll move, yeah, I'll move we approve
Article 5,
Article 5, yeah.
inasmuch as we passed the bylaw last year for the stormwater, we have to now actually accept this statute in order to operate it as an enterprise fund.
Right. So I'll move we approve Article 5.
Second.
okay. Any discussion on 5? Okay, all those in favor? Okay.
Can I sidebar on that
Yeah,
very briefly? I distributed this afternoon a draft of credit, discount, whatever you want to call it,
So-
abatement policies. So maybe for Monday night, we could have that on the agenda. And if you have any questions or comments about it, for today or tomorrow or Friday, maybe shoot me a note or give me a call. It's pretty straightforward, but I think it'd be important for the select board to adopt those, well before the fiscal year starts.
And how would those fees, would they come out like the water and sewer bill, or like,
They will be on the water and sewer
it'll be
bill.
on the water and sewer bill?
Yes, we're trying to get them right on the water and sewer bill. So they will come out at the same time, early September and early March is when they'll be assessed.
Mhm.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion, we approve Article 6 with the numbers as we approved in the budget. I'm not sure what's on the warrant or the exact numbers, so I want to approve it with the expenses.
If you want a number, it's 66,524,677.
Okay, so
Second.
that's what's on my version of the warrant, and that's what we went through, right?
That's what we went through, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay,
Yeah.
and all those in favor? Okay, approved.
Do you guys vote on 1 and 2?
Article
And
7.
Two is
Not yet.
tabled.
Table two
We
is
just gonna
tabled.
need an update on the number.
Okay.
I'll move we approve Article 7.
3 is held until we get to 8.
A second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay. 8? Now, do we need to-
I'll move we approve Article 8 as written with changes by taking the line that says fire truck replacement reserve and splitting it into two lines, one that says fire truck replacement reserve, $60,000, and fire department, I don't know, we're calling it chase vehicle, $40,000? Is that what we want to call it?
Or Fire Department Ford Explorer.
Fire department supplemental or assistant chief vehicle.
Call it Car 2. It's Car 2 is what he called it in his capital
Fine.
request. To replace Car 2.
Fine.
Okay.
So we're going to change line item, it says fire truck replacement reserve at 150 and change that to say fire truck replacement reserve, $60,000, fire truck 2, fire department
Fire
vehicle
car
2,
number or vehicle.
Replacement.
vehicle 2 replacement,
Mhm.
$40,000.
Car 2 for, okay, do we have a second on that?
Is that okay, Debbie? Did you get
Yeah.
that?
But then you have to change the bottom number here.
And then we need to change the amount that we were taking from free cash.
We're going to go back, but we're going to go back and do that next, this Article 2, once this passed. We didn't
No,
vote on
we
it.
have to change it, we have to change it in Article 8, because right now it's coming out of the free cash. We want to change that to raise and appropriate.
No, it's not. It's coming out from raise and appropriate,
The
FY29.
last part, the last two items
Raise and appropriate,
are the highway half-ton pickup truck,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is the 1.5-ton rack body. Those are right now coming out of free cash, available funds.
Oh,
in the
those
treasury.
say.
That's what the 50,000 is
That's where the 50, we want to
okay.
change those to
Right.
raise and
Yeah.
appropriate.
Right, so we do want to change.
37 and
So we
13.
so we want to change, right, so the motion should include changing the half-ton pickup truck so that $13,000 comes from raise and appropriate, and from the 1.5-ton truck rack body
There it
pickup
is.
to come up with okay, that's what I was looking for
Yeah.
before, okay.
But that
That
does-
$37,500.
That comes out to 5,500.
Make it work, Paul.
I think in free cash, we had that amount left over. And even, it's not coming out of free cash, so what we're doing is, the $500 is not going to make a big difference anywhere, just trust me on that. Because we're taking 50,500 here. If you want to put the 500 in Article 3, you can put the Article 3 500 if you want.
We haven't gone to Article 3.
I know, but if you want, you can say 220,500 to make everything even.
Then we ought to. right?
Okay, that's fine, but that's how it would work out.
Okay, so for Article 7, we're changing that line item that says fire truck,
Article 8.
excuse me, Article 8.
yeah.
We're changing the line item that says fire truck replacement reserve to two line items. And we're changing the bottom that says from available funds in the treasury to make that raise and appropriate.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
I'd like to go back and reconsider Article 3.
Number 3 it is.
I'd like to move that we approve Article 3, but make the transfer from available funds in the treasury the sum of $220,500.
Okay, do we have a
To-
second on that motion?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay. Do we need to, can we go back to the tabled motion on number 2? or-
Sure.
No, because that's
$20,500.
snow and ice removal, we won't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I need to get that from Mario.
Okay. All right, so now we move to Article 9. raise and appropriate 14 million for the purpose of constructing and furnishing a new council of aging facility.
No.
No.
Article
Okay.
9 is Morningside Drive.
Morningside.
Oh, okay, this, I still.
Move to approve Article 9.
Second.
Need a second? Okay, so this is money for Morningside Drive. All those in favor? Put it on the warrant? Okay. And Article 10 is to authorize the treasurer to borrow for the purpose of replacing water mains on Kingsbury Road.
So moved.
Motion? Okay,
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, place it on the warrant. Article 11, transfer the sum for the Edgewater mains and Forest Glen Pump Station, Sunset Lane.
So moved.
Okay, a second? I'm good, discussion.
Discussion.
Yeah,
Well, I'll second it for the purpose of
Okay.
all
discussion.
right.
That's not a private road?
What
I mean,
are we talking
I don't know
about?
if Farm matters,
Yeah, it does.
I think it's an accepted street, isn't it?
is it? I mean, it always was, I thought maybe,
Well, let's table it until
Well,
we could get that answer. That's going to be an important answer.
It wouldn't be on
it
here
wouldn't be on there.
if
I'm
it
just
was
curious.
if it wasn't an accepted street.
No.
Actually, I take that back, because we do have a water main on Dunn Road or West Road, one of those two, and it doesn't have to be a public way to have water service.
Right.
Well,
It's
should
still
we
It's still our
accept
water
it?
department.
And should we accept it as a public way before we spend money on it?
No, we're not spending money on the road. We're spending money on the pipe underneath the road.
Yeah, I
Right,
think you still have to do it, I was just curious.
right.
Yeah.
And we still charge people for the water.
Right.
So
Right.
it's, but,
Where did you move?
good point. Okay, so any further discussion on that?
How did you change
Do we
this?
want to move forward to a
You're
vote?
reading the same as.
Well, I just have a quick question, and I guess, so we're moving money from 3 projects that weren't fully expended,
Correct.
okay?
The balance of 104 we're going to borrow for,
Yeah,
the total cost being $126,050.
okay, and my question is, what it's always been is there any money in the water stabilization fund we should consider using to pay for, and I already know the answer, because we're barely at $500,000.
We're barely
but-
at 500, which is our minimum, and that's
Right,
why I
right.
did not take it out of there, whereas the next one,
But
sewer.
you did take it out, okay.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, so are we ready for vote on this? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, and Article 12 is the transfer of funds. Yeah,
I'll move that we approve Article 12.
okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? All right, and Article 13, for the purpose of constructing and furnishing a council of aging facility.
I'd like to table that one until after the COA meeting tomorrow.
Okay. All right,
We don't have to table it, there's no motion, you just skip
there's
it.
no
Yeah,
motion,
skip
so
it, yeah.
we'll skip 12. Okay, Article 13,
No, that was 13.
oh, you're right,
14.
I'm sorry, yes. Okay, Article 14,
Article 14, I can provide numbers for. I had to work with the new contracted assessor to get what the estimated value would be, so so in order to find out what next year's tax revenue would be, I got that today. The FY19 anticipated tax revenue is about $104,000. So I need to actually put that $104,000 into this article, so I just asked that you table it, and I can have that
Yeah,
done for
well, we'll just
Monday.
do it on Monday with the
But
other.
that is the amount. They will be assessed, I think it's $4.2 million roughly valuation, which will bring in just over $100,000 worth of revenue on that DIF project.
okay, so we'll wait to take 14. Move to Article 15, which is,
Move to approve Chapter 15, which is our Chapter 90 money expenditures, right?
okay.
Yes.
We have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of 15, put on the warrant? Okay. Article 16.
Well, can we do all the CP?
16, I don't know which version you have. Is this the town, the
Right,
school
yes.
department revolving fund?
This-
They do not need that.
No, this is CPC.
No,
No,
16,
they've updated
no, not on the new
Okay,
one.
okay, right. There might be a change now because of different versions we have going on here, but we
Okay.
do not need to do the school revolving fund. So
Okay.
if you have it on your, you can cross it right off. If you
Why-
have it on your copy,
Why not, Paul?
they don't have any more money coming in.
Oh, they got rid of the vending machines?
Right.
Okay.
So the next article would be the $8,000 for the community preservation.
So can we move to approve 16, 17?
No,
We
Not
got to do
16.
each one?
each
We
one.
can, wait a second, we can approve them any way we want to, we're just approving them to put them on the warrant. We're not approving the contents of them. Fine, do it, I'm not gonna, it's not, we're gonna spend more time arguing than it takes.
Well,
us
the
to
other
split.
thing is,
Make your
Mike,
motion, Marie.
sorry, hold on.
I move to approve 16.
16 or 17?
No, 17.
Well, that's the administration.
No,
The 8,000
16
We're gonna do
is,
16.
on the new warrant
They
is
have it.
16, is the first CPC.
Yeah, 16 is 8,000 for administration.
Yeah.
Oh,
Is there a second?
second.
Okay. All those in favor?
I move to approve 17,
Which is $30,000 for Bliss Park
Bliss
Playground.
Park, yes.
Bliss Park Playground, seconded?
Second.
Okay.
Wait, hold on.
Yes.
We're getting into a section where town council has reviewed the warrant and has had comments on some of these CPA articles.
Oh, okay.
And so just slow the roll a little bit. There's ones that are fine and ones he has comments on. I forwarded his comments to the CPA chair, and I want to, maybe between now and Monday night, get some feedback on the comments.
So should we just skip these?
Well, no.
The next-
Article 18 for the playground equipment is, he did not have a comment on that. Article 19, you should hold.
Okay, so we're holding 17.
No, you're holding,
You're
19.
gonna have to talk to them about what the titles are as opposed to the article number.
okay.
Okay,
right.
so 17
So-
on Bliss Park is okay to continue with the vote?
The parts, the repairs and replacement parts for playgrounds?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so there was a motion and a second.
For 17, okay. All those in favor of Article 17? Put in the warrant?
We already
Okay.
voted on that.
And 18, we can do the same.
Tables and benches, can we go ahead?
Benches.
I would hold,
Hold.
Oh, hold
Which
on.
is the riverfront conservation.
yes.
Yes.
Okay, so
Can we know what his concerns are?
It's mostly, the comments are related to the CPA statute and how closely the things relate, and I'd rather not.
Oh, in other words, if these qualify for,
It's his feedback on it, it's not a necessarily, black and white legal opinion, and so I'd like to have the opportunity to talk to the CPA chair before we kind of get into that.
How about the
Okay.
trail improvement and purchase of trees and picnics at Bliss Park? Can we do that?
it's Article 19.
Yeah.
Wait,
Picnic tables.
the picnic tables I would hold as well, because the two are somewhat related.
Okay, gutters and railings on the
That one's
community.
okay.
I move to approve Article 20.
Is there a second? Okay.
that's the $68,000?
Yeah.
The gutters, yeah, the community center.
Community house, yeah.
Okay. All those in favor?
Wolf Swamp irrigation fields, can we do it?
He just made a notation for the summary description, but otherwise, okay.
Move to approve Article 21.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
The next one is the Wolf Swamp Ring Road.
Same, he just made a notation for the summary.
Okay. Move to approve Article 22.
Second.
Okay. 22 is the
Ring Road.
ring road. Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
Train station,
I would hold.
hold, okay. General bylaws on revolving fund, can I do that?
Now you're out of
We're out of
CPA.
So we're okay. Move to approve Article 24, revolving fund.
Is there a
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Okay, Article 25, it's another revolving fund.
Yeah.
One is creating the bylaw for the revolving fund. It's something new with the Municipal Modernization Act created. We have to create a bylaw first, and then we have to create, by DOR requirements, we have to create a limit within that revolving fund annually. So what'll happen is next year you'll receive a repeat of the second part of the revolving fund. It's $85,000 that's expected to be taken into that fund in FY19.
All right, move to approve Article 25.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? All right.
Easements, placeholder, should we hold that till we get an
Yeah.
actual one?
Yeah, you need
Yep.
something.
Okay.
We
And then
don't-
the
we
next
don't-
one's a placeholder too, so we'll hold that.
We don't get to vote on the others, but I'd like to talk about Paul Pasturzik's handout today for a new article to be inserted as, I'm going to call it Article 26 or something like that, which is for the appointment of the town treasurer as the OPEB benefits trust fund trustee.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion on that? I know we talked on the last meeting. Okay, all those in favor? Okay, right.
So that's the end of our select board business. I just, can I comment on the bylaw issues briefly? We're trying to focus in on, unfortunately, the weather has impacted the bylaw review committee. Every meeting has had to have been canceled because of weather. So we actually haven't gotten in the same room. There's been a lot of email correspondence and thoughts. You'll be getting a letter in your next packet from a resident who is concerned about the commercial vehicle bylaw. So, I don't know which direction the board wants to go. I don't want to spend a lot of time trying to craft these bylaws and create arguments for them if they're going to fall flat here. The commercial vehicle thing is really just, the intent of it is to have someone who lives in a home, but maybe works for a company that gives them a take-home vehicle that is registered commercially, and allow them to park it in their driveway overnight, whereas now it has to be garaged. And the primary reason to do this is how the bylaw is enforced by complaint. And when one neighbor is mad at another neighbor, they just call the police department or Paul Healy every day and say, it's there again, it's there again, it's there again. And eventually Paul Healy would have to start issuing citations, or the police department have to issue citations. Neither he nor the police department want to do that, because I think they agree that, it really is an outdated bylaw that is now turned punitive in ways that I don't think was originally intended. However, we don't think it's right for large, trucks, like a tow truck or something like that, to be parked in driveways overnight. And so the current line of thinking is limit it to basically a vehicle weight of about 7,000 pounds, which is essentially a Chevy 2500 pickup truck, and up to 2 axles, 6 wheels. So a normal pickup truck like a dually.
6 wheels?
Yeah.
Dual axle in the back.
No, just 2 tires on the back instead of 1.
So-
They call them a dually. They have the 2 tires side by side.
Oh, okay.
There are people who use them as just regular.
Okay, I
vehicle,
thought
like-
you meant there was 2 in the middle and we were talking.
No, 2 axles, but some pickup trucks do have the 2 wheels. Some people have it registered as a non-commercial vehicle because they may have a horse trailer that they go. And so, because I think it's, there are a lot of homes that are older that don't have sufficient garage capacity for a vehicle, and if someone, like I said, has a take-home vehicle, they shouldn't be penalized. And just chasing these things down takes up an exceptional amount of Paul Healy's time and the police department's time for something that really doesn't cause very much harm.
Yeah. And would there be any kind of restriction on, the size of the graphics, or, because that's,
I think right now it would just be the vehicle size, the size of the vehicle.
Yeah.
I think if you get into the subjective judgment of how they're lettered, it's a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I don't know how, I mean, I just know, like, there used to be people, their whole vehicle would be painted a certain way, and I don't think we've seen a lot of that, but I don't know if we would.
I've seen sedans completely covered in graphics, like there's a solar company guy has a
Right,
completely
yeah.
covered. I mean,
Yeah,
but does that mean you know, it has to be garaged? If he lives in the house, it's not like, I mean, somebody with like working on a house, like a contractor working on a house and leaving his vehicle there overnight and not living there, that's still not going to be allowed.
mm-hmm,
It's only for, it's only allowed for people who are, actually, I take that back. The intent is to have it allowed for people who live in a house and happen to have a commercial vehicle as their primary vehicle.
mm-hmm.
Marie?
Marie, I'm sorry, yes.
I have a question. The bylaw committee, who's on it?
It is a member or two of the ZBA,
Okay.
a member or two of the planning board, myself, Paul Healy, and Mike Schneider.
Okay. And like you said, you have trouble getting them together. Who ends up, I mean, what gives you a quorum?
Well, there's no quorum. It's just an ad hoc committee. It's
Yeah,
not-
but I'm just worried, are they showing up? Are they participating?
Yeah, I mean, we've been corresponding by email
It's
semi-regularly.
probably been snow.
Yeah,
Yeah, but how many times has the bylaw committee met since January?
0.
Since last July?
Once or twice, maybe.
Okay. Should we, I mean, because what worries me is that how are we deciding what bylaws we're going to address? Is it, have people been calling and dropping complaints that they want to park their truck in their driveway and they can't do it?
No, I just explained to you, it's the opposite.
It's the opposite, exactly. So people aren't asking for this right to be able to do it.
No, people are penalized for doing it in a way that is, like I said, it takes up a lot of staff time, both police and Paul Healy's time, and it is kind of an anachronistic bylaw that it really is just, it's a tool for neighbors to mess with other neighbors is really all it's turned out to be.
Well, but I'll argue that's what it's become, because our system is by law enforcement by complaint. But there will be people at our town meeting who will say the intent was commercial vehicles, i.e. trucks, should not be parked in driveways. That's why people have garages. And I think we're going to end up getting more pushback than several of us suspect if we propose the bylaw that allowed commercial vehicles, whether it's because my company gives me a vehicle and it happens to be a truck or whatever it is. And I also think, Stephen, that the determination of size may be overly generous if, in the proposal that you talked about in terms of, and whatever it was, a Chevy 250 or whatever it is, in terms of, I think more and more people are saying, yeah, if it's a, pickup truck with 4 wheels and, gross vehicle weight less than whatever, maybe it's okay, but once you get to a double set of wheels on the back, it's truly a commercial vehicle and people are gonna start being concerned. And I'd rather slowly move into this. The question's gonna be is, no matter what we have for a bylaw, I think the debate's gonna be over, are we going to be willing to enforce the bylaws for people who, are still parking those vehicles overnight? I mean, that's the the bigger problem. And more importantly, do we change the bylaws because our current resources are, Paul Healy can't be running out there with all these people who are quote violating current bylaws, because the bylaws of 1952 haven't kept up with people driving pickup trucks as their, Richard Foster drives a pickup truck as his primary vehicle.
Does this take a 2/3 vote?
Mhm.
2/3, yeah.
All I'm saying is, and that's all fair points, I mean, a couple years ago, the overnight parking issue was a citizen's petition, and then Police Chief Bob Siano, who had been here since, horse and buggy days, said the bylaw was on the books when he got hired, and he has no idea why, and it isn't really a needed thing in his view from a public safety standpoint. It still failed at town meeting. All I'm saying to you is this is an issue that is disruptive at times to our operations in a way that isn't, other than, and I guess it's really subjective, obviously, but it's not being applied to, contractors leaving vehicles at vacant houses overnight. It's being applied to people living in the home and just happen to have a commercial vehicle that is their take-home vehicle. And neighbors, calling and saying, we don't like the fact that you have this bylaw, go enforce it. And we do. But it's difficult, because then you're really punishing people for something that, like I said, is not they are not violating the spirit of the bylaw, I guess is how I would say it. And so the bylaw should be tightened up. So
Well, what's the spirit of the bylaw? There is no spirit. The bylaw is the bylaw. I mean, and I'm not saying it's a good bylaw, because I happen to think that like I said, there are plenty of people now who drive, F-150s and whatever they are,
So
but it's a commercial
Mini
plate.
pickups.
But
So
it's
this
a
is
commercial plate. Commercial plate.
You see, in that, well, so if I drove a pickup truck that had a non-commercial plate, it's not covered.
It's not the type of vehicle, it's the type of plate.
It's the registration.
It's the registration. It is most commonly talked about with pickup trucks, but a sedan, an unlettered sedan that just happens to have a commercial plate, cannot be parked in the driveway overnight. So it's not even just lettering. And so this, by going to 7,000 GVW, gross vehicle weight, which is what we're talking about, you would make it so sedans and smaller sized pickup trucks that were commercially registered would be able to be parked in driveways, just like a million other people have pickup trucks parked in their driveways. The only difference is the tag. And maybe sometimes they're lettered. You could have somebody who has a home business and has their personal vehicle non-commercial registration, and it's got those vinyl things applied to the whole thing too, that is not covered by the bylaw. And so we're just trying to bring some clarity to it and make it easier to enforce for clear violations.
I'm all for it if you just, as you say, tighten it up, make sure it's, because you're right, I mean, it could be the exact same vehicle with the passive vehicle plate. I mean,
But there's certain vehicles, Bill, that aren't eligible for commercial plate, and for non-commercial plates, for residential plates, over certain weight classes, right?
Well, so that's an attempt to clarify that with the weight and axles, and I'm all for tightening it up. I think you're saying the same thing. It's silly to have just a pickup truck and one guy's driveway and another one's, that's what I'm getting at. I hear you. I mean, I don't like, large commercial vehicles with wood chippers hanging off of them and stuff. And nobody wants that. But if it's just going to be like a pickup truck,
Even a pickup truck with a plow. Some people use a snow plow to plow their own
The guy
driveways.
across the street from me has one. He just does it on his own. He doesn't have a commercial.
Plate,
So what if he had a commercial plate on it? Now he's got to.
just put it in the garage. Has to be in the garage.
That's
So non-commercial tag, he can have a Ram quad cab dually, a giant vehicle that you can hear a mile away when it starts, with an 9-foot plow on it, and he gets to leave it in his driveway all the time. That same person, you could have a person with an F-150 with a commercial plate and no plow, and they cannot park it in their driveway under our bylaw. And again, this has come across our radar screen only in cases of residents, and a certain few residents who call repetitively against a neighbor of theirs, someone who lives and owns the home next door. And it's just one of those things where it's frustrating for Paul, it's frustrating for me, and it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I don't know why the bylaw was written the way it was, but there are people who, and not even say work in the trades. There are people who own homes and get vehicles, take-home vehicles as a benefit.
Right, yeah, and I think there's some folks in town who purposely don't have their names on the vehicles because it makes their life a lot easier, although they work here a lot. And then, yeah, there are other folks who, their employer says, this is your vehicle, take it home, show up at this job site in the morning, and I think they are at a disadvantage. I mean, we have to look at an ordinance that interferes with a person's ability to work. I mean, people should have freedom in their employment, yeah.
Well, I'd counter that with
Yeah.
zoning bylaws are intended for the neighbors and not for the residents, to some degree. For the same reason, we've now got your lawn can't be more than 4 inches tall and all that other stuff. And so, Stephen, to some degree, you're right. The only time our bylaws are enforced is when it's impacting the I don't know if it's the sensitivities or the quality of life of the neighbors. And for the most part, if my neighbors are not bothering me and they've got a non-compliant vehicle, and they come in at night and they go home and the car's not making a lot of noise and they're not putting log splitters behind it, nobody's going to know about it. But to the extent that they're abusing the neighborhood, then I want some recourse, and I think that's what the zoning bylaws are. I think that's what the zoning bylaws were intended to be.
Yeah, Marie?
Then people will vote against it.
Right. I
And
think
if
that's
it passes, we'll have to start enforcing more. I mean,
if it fails, we have to start enforcing more too.
No, right now,
No,
it's compliance, by complaint. And I think if we really do that, you shined a light on it, and there might possibility you'll have more resources going out there, because people say, oh, look at that bylaw, I didn't realize we had it.
Right.
So,
You shine a light on it.
shine a light on
You're
it.
right.
Honestly,
So,
no, I mean, I think that's a pretty naive way of looking at it, because what's going to happen is there are tons of these vehicles out there, and we only respond to complaints about a few of them because it bothers the people complaining. There are plenty of people for whom it is not a bother, and they don't complain because it's their neighbor.
Right.
Well, we'll see what happens at town meeting.
Well, no, I'm saying, is it worth me even presenting this on Monday night as part of the warrant?
I think you're getting here a capsule of what you're going to get at the time. I mean, the town meeting, it's not going to be a 5-minute discussion. We're going to spend a long time doing it. Discussing, because it becomes a sensitive issue for people who say, hey, I got no problem now, but I don't know who's going to move into my neighborhood next week with, a truck that looks pretty good, but they took the muffler off of it, and now it wakes me up at 6:30 in the morning. What?
Yeah.
We could do that anyway.
Well, this is like the infill lot, where people were using those ugly homes on Lincoln Parkway, as examples of why not to do the infill bylaw.
Well said.
And they're going to have the same outcome.
It was apples and dump trucks.
But you're going to have the same outcome.
Where people are going to say, it's extrapolatory arguments that then lose sight of what the actual thing we're discussing is.
Welcome to town
But you
meeting.
help me maintain my neighborhood, because someday will come when you're going to need me to maintain your neighborhood. And that's the argument that gets these things to fail at town meeting and keep the bylaws we have.
I think you'd have people step forward and say, I need to, there's people who had to build an oversized garage
Right across the street?
so they could put their vehicle in.
Right, right.
Yeah.
The other ones that we're looking at is monument signs for business use or for non-residential use in the signage bylaws. So basically, the monument signs that Bay Path University has, they are covered under the objects in the tree belt policy. They're not really covered by our sign bylaws. And so for places that don't have tree belts that are as generous as that one is, they may, that's a non-residential use, they may want a monument sign that says, welcome to the Field Club, welcome to Twin Hills, welcome to the Long Meadow Country Club, like Bay Path University has.
You have to go to planning board then.
it's not allowed under our bylaws. What we're looking at is allowing something like that.
There was also a sign policy that we were looking at for people who wanted to sponsor triangles and things like that, and see, what concerns me is what falls off the radar and what stays on the radar of the bylaw task force, town manager task force, or whatever we're calling it. And so there's a lot of bylaws that are lined up that are now not priorities. How are we prioritizing which is coming up and which is not?
Mostly by operational considerations is how I'm prioritizing. But the other thing is, the bylaw changes you wanted also went through the task forces for evaluation.
Oh, the one about sponsoring triangles?
The signage content issues are, because there's a proposal to do a banner, a signage bylaw to allow banners at playing fields. But the draft that we received had some language about what type of content, and that triggers a First Amendment discussion similar to the campaign signs that is as yet unresolved. The triangle sign is the same issue.
Okay, so in other words, the best way to get a bylaw moving is we make a draft and we present it to the bylaw task force. And should there be something on our website telling residents that this task force exists, and if they have concerns about bylaws, they want changes, they should address it.
They can submit them to me, they can submit them to the planning board, they can submit them to the ZBA. This is not really a formal committee, it's just an ad hoc group of people that get together and discuss these issues.
Yeah, I thought that was the way we get things on the warrant, though, in a way of bylaws, that we were forming this task group so that we could analyze and decide which bylaws to make changes.
And that's how it's worked.
Okay, so it is not just ad hoc, it's something we're using now.
I'm using.
Yes,
As
okay.
town manager, I've asked these people to be a group and meet to inform me, so when I present things to the select board, they are informed by the opinions of representatives of some of the regulatory bodies. It is not a appointed board of the select board that is subject to open meeting and open records laws, although if people wanted to come to the meetings, I'm sure they could. It's not really anything.
Well, it's like traffic safety.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a working committee. We're allowed to have working committees.
I'm not saying you're not allowed, I'm saying what is the process going forward?
But you're saying, how does members of the general public get into these meetings, is what I heard you saying.
How do they get bylaws looked at?
Citizens
Because
petitions
I've
is
had-
still the number one
I know,
option.
But there've been people that have sent to us, I know that Don Holland, a year and a half ago, sent a request on a bylaw issue in regards to pushing snow, other people pushing snow from their driveways into other people's yards. And so there's a lot of these ones that are sitting out here, and I'm asking you, the best way to do it is to present it to you, and then it will go through the bylaw task force or town manager working group, ad hoc, whatever you want to call it, and then that's how it usually can get on a town warrant, unless they do a citizen's petition.
But now you're jumping tracks a little bit, because that's a general bylaw. General bylaws can be presented directly to the select board,
Okay.
or by citizens petition. We're usually talking about specific zoning, land use, decision. The ZBA, the stuff that we talk about at the committee are issues related to things that the planning board has jurisdiction over, or the ZBA has jurisdiction over. Things like signage and even the commercial vehicle one is a general bylaw. That's really just been between Paul Healy and I and Mike Schneider. We have it on the list of bylaw things we're talking about, but the ZBA and the planning board, members of this task force, that's not really their thing. And that's one that's generated by operational considerations. So it depends on so to answer your question even more vaguely, it depends on the bylaw you want to change, on what the best way forward is.
So best thing is go to select board, and then the select board will decide if they have to pass it off to planning or to the town manager.
You can come here, they can come to me, you can come to the select board directly. People do citizens petitions for bylaw things. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Just the way to do it where you get input and buy-in from the planning board and zoning board if they are land use related because there are general bylaws that do relate to land use, but there are general bylaws that have nothing to do with land use, and the planning board and zoning board aren't really involved in those. And then we have our zoning bylaws, which are a completely separate thing.
Can we just go?
I just have one question, because if a person had a vehicle and people were complaining about it, could they make just some remedies, like covering it with a tarp or putting up a shielding fence? I mean, because I
No.
would think that would be some other options.
No,
here.
it's got to be garaged.
Yeah, so I mean, because I guess we look at this, if maybe there were a few different options to consider, I wonder if that would help.
It
Because there
really.
are some, I agree with Mark, there's some people who say, I just like to look out my window and I just like to see houses, normal cars and so forth, but if there was a way for people to still have their vehicle with the signage on it, but maybe if they had to shield it or put a tarp over it, or, with that,
No tarps.
no,
No tarps. You don't want tarps.
you don't want tarps. That
No.
would make it worse.
And there are things like trailers can be put in the backyard. We do have those kinds of provisions.
Yeah,
But we're talking about like people's vehicles that they travel in day to day. I
every
mean,
day, if they,
you have a garage, but you don't park your cars in it.
no,
Right. That a lot of people have garages that they do not park cars in because they were built in the 30s, and they're just not sized appropriately,
Full of
and
stuff.
they're sheds. They're full of stuff. And like I said, most of the older garages and the older homes couldn't fit an F-150 even.
yeah.
And it's just one of those issues where it just doesn't make sense to me why someone who lives in the community and works and just happens to have a vehicle that is just like everybody else's private vehicles, except for the license plate and maybe some lettering, is essentially penalized by this bylaw. And again, the reason why the enforcement is somewhat by complaint is that it doesn't bother most people. Most people are like, Joe's my neighbor, and he keeps his, he's not running his shop out of his house. He doesn't have a bunch of guys on his crew report to the house and they mobilize. I mean, it's just, it's just commuting back and forth to work in the car happens to be there. That's the vast majority.
Yeah,
But Stephen, on the other hand, there's a difference between, my neighbor's got an F-150, and my neighbor's got an F-150, and October 1st, he puts a plow on it and keeps the plow on it in the driveway until March 15th. And now all of a sudden, it looks a whole lot different with somebody sitting there with a plow as opposed to an F-150. And so, I think we've got to, if we want to make this change, and I understand it helps the operations of the town a little bit to do that, we've got to start saying, let's not go from here to here, but let's take a first step of saying, a minimum vehicle, and then and see how it works, and get people used to the fact that you can't call me over an F-150. But yeah, if there's a plow on it or a log splitting trailer attached to it or whatever it is, that's still
Trailers
still a
are
bylaw.
already covered by the bylaw. Because no storage of trailers in the front yard, it has to be screened. The trailers are already covered.
Right, but
But a plow, you could certainly amend the thing to say, gross vehicle weight of 7,000 pounds, and then, plows shall not be permitted to be parked overnight in the thing, but then that person's got to take the plow on and off fairly regularly.
Let's
Or
see
put
what
it in the garage.
Let's see what you bring to us.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think if it's
Or put it in
fine
the garage.
tuned, just as an example, so in my neighborhood, I have a guy that on weekends sometimes does these side jobs, and he travels a distance. So sometimes early in the morning, there'll maybe 3 or 4 pickup trucks that line up in front of his house on the street, and they pile into him, and he's gone for the day. They're not commercial, there's nothing illegal, it doesn't actually bother me at all, but, that would be way more offensive, I would think, all these pickup trucks lined up down the street than having one in the driveway that's got a commercial.
But that's not a bylaw violation.
No, it's not.
And the
No, I'm
guy's
saying.
single truck is the bylaw violation.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, I'm agreeing.
Right.
Yeah, the practical reality is, like I said, it's vehicles, vehicle use, the types of vehicles people buy. It's just different now in the world we're in than when the bylaw was done. And do we want to update the bylaw?
I think if it's worded right,
Right.
well, I would support if it's worded right, and let the town decide. you
Yeah,
know?
but just remember that it's not that says a pickup truck's not allowed. It's a commercially registered pickup truck that's not allowed. You know, so if, you know, Richard Foster's driving his pickup truck that's not commercially registered, he can park that in the driveway all he wants to. And there's no violation, so we kind of have to be careful about that. Stephen, can I just ask you, has anybody asked about these monument signs? Having other monuments?
Twin Hills has, most recently, and I know other places have as
And
well.
they haven't asked for a variance?
It's not allowed. You can't get a variance.
Well, Baypath did.
But it's not covered by the sign bylaw. That was done under the objects in the tree belt policy, under a license agreement.
Because they don't have a big enough tree belt to do it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, they don't want to put it in the tree belt. Because not all tree belts are 60 feet or whatever it is out there, so if it's in the tree belt, it could get hit with snow, some of the tree belts are a little closer to the edge. And it just is, you know, it's a nice option. I think it can be an enhancement for non-residential.
Or it can be a clutter of streets if people don't think it that way too.
But we have so few commercial that, there's so few places this would be.
Right, but the Long Meadow shops could ask for
Right.
something there, and they could ask for something over by where Rinaldi's is, and they could ask for something by
Well, no,
where the
that's where
bank is.
you have limitations on the number and the size and the lighting, and just like all the other signs. You have dimensional limitations and all that other stuff.
I hear you.
Like Long Meadow Country Club, you know, they're redoing, if they wanted to put two kind of monument
Okay.
piers to to close in their parking lot, not close in, but define their parking lot, and said Long Meadow Country Club, you know, plenty of communities have these types of things, it's just not allowed. Listen, there's not a hue and cry for it.
Right.
But it's just one of those ones where when we look at the bylaws, it's like, well, why don't we allow that? You know.
You know, and I guess the one thing I would say is are there, you know, other people who could ask for signs as well? I'm thinking in terms of, St. Andrews has a sign way back on the lawn of St. Andrews. It's not right up front.
That's probably not compliant.
That's-
I know, and here's the other thing. There's a bunch of ones out there that have been there for years and are non-compliant. And so doing this could then be a way of taking signs that,
Be careful what you.
And then you can file, what do you call, have fees for people who want to put up monument signs.
yeah, St. Mary's is another example.
Right, they got.
It's in their front yard. That's a monument sign in their front yard. Like, is that allowed under where? No, it's pre-existing non-conforming. Probably St. Andrews is too.
Right.
But if the sign got wiped out by a car, would they be able to replace it? I don't know. And that's the thing. It's one of these things where most communities have bylaws like this that allow these kinds of things for these types of properties, and we don't. And so when someone asks, hey, can I put up a monument sign, Twin Hills asks, can we do this?
The answer is no.
And the answer is no, you can't. And it's like, it's kind of nonsensical that we can't do that. It's just, and it really is, I say defect in the bylaws, when the bylaws have evolved over time and still haven't caught up with, you know.
I think you're going to that's what makes Long Meadow. And it's this, I don't think something like this would pass, because it's not that nobody's ever had those signs for the last, it's not like
Yeah.
people now, pickup trucks went from being only for commercial to, over the last 15, 20 years, they're now used by the general population. And signs were signs all the time.
Well, it's not really, we'll just leave it to the legislative branch, and
Yeah.
so see what you bring to us on Monday.
Yeah, because there are,
I specifically am asking for feedback, because I don't want to waste time doing it if it's not well thought out, Marie.
I think you're going to get a lot of
I think you've got a
pushback.
lot of feedback, Stephen. I don't
But
think
not
you'd hesitate.
clear feedback. Is
You're never
My
going to get
sense is
clear
that they're not going
feedback.
to pass, but you can
pass here or pass town meeting?
pass town meeting.
Right. No, I just want to know if they're going to pass here.
Just bring it here and show us the things on Monday,
yeah. Well, 'cause
or
there
don't
are-
bother.
Well, again, you can convince us, I think.
Yeah.
Give us some more examples, because I think that, there are some times where these monument signs actually enhance the way your community looks. So,
All right. I mean, honestly, and not, this isn't like, oh yeah, well, I'll show you. This is, because of the delays and trying to get together, I'm starting to get the sense that maybe we may just not put these on this warrant. And maybe look at the fall and sharpen these, and it may need more refinement.
Okay, well, we will consider all the options in the future. We're going to end the meeting. If I can have a motion.
So we've still got a few warrant articles that need to be addressed on Monday.
Just a handful of them, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Okay. Well, thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Good night.